This evening, you travel to Gravity Falls, beneath its tourist attractions. On October 27, 2014, viewers return to the Oregon town in Society of the Blind Eye, the seventh episode of Gravity Falls' second season. Beneath the bright displays and familiar roads, glass tubes preserve the memories that frightened residents had surrendered. You are standing beneath the town's cheerful tourist signs, where painted pine trees and smiling mountains promise clean air, family entertainment, and peaceful views of the forest. Rain has darkened the wooden boards outside the Gravity Falls Museum of History, leaving them almost black beneath the yellow lamps. Water gathers along the pavement in shallow silver pools. Somewhere beyond the walls, a ventilation fan turns slowly, its rhythm softened by the wet night. Inside, fluorescent lights cast a low, patient hum over glass cases, old photographs, mineral samples, and faded notices about local pioneers. Dust lies beneath the display cases in thin, undisturbed lines, as though the museum has been waiting quietly for someone to remember it. You move through the galleries with Dipper Pines, Mabel Pines, Suze Ramirez, and Wendy Corduroy. Dipper carries the alert, searching manner that has guided him through many strange discoveries. Mabel walks beside him with bright curiosity, while Suze and Wendy bring their familiar ease into the shadowed rooms. All four have learned that Gravity Falls is not merely an unusual town. It is a place where monsters, anomalies, and disturbing events appear often enough to become part of daily life. Around you, the museum glows with weak and patient brightness. Rain trembles against the windows. The wooden frames smell faintly of damp bark and old varnish. Beneath the display cases, dust gathers around the feet of extinct animals, broken tools, and labeled stones. A stuffed animal watches from one corner with dull yellow eyes. Nearby, a cracked photograph shows a family gathered beneath a mountain whose shape seems slightly wrong. Outside, passing headlights move across the walls like pale reflections from another world. The air remains cool against your face, carrying the smell of wet timber from the entrance and the dry mineral scent of dust from the galleries. Every sound seems to belong to the building itself. Dipper, Mabel, Suze, and Wendy discover that the town's silence has a pattern. Residents who have encountered monsters and impossible events often remember only fragments, excuses, or nothing at all. Their memories have not faded naturally. Someone has been removing them. Beneath the Gravity Falls Museum of History, a secret society has been erasing residents' memories for years, preserving the town's calm by cutting away the experiences that threaten it. You follow the four friends beyond the bright public rooms, where the museum's cheerful history gives way to a narrow passage. A hidden entrance waits behind the exhibits. Beyond it, the floor becomes rougher beneath your feet, and cold stone stairs lead downward in a long, quiet descent. Moisture darkens the walls. The smell of rain disappears, replaced by limestone, dust, and metal. Above you, the fluorescent lights fade into a distant vibration. Below, the ventilation fan draws the underground air through unseen passages. At the bottom of the stairs, you find the members of the Society of the Blind Eye. They wear heavy robes and conceal their faces beneath hoods. Their gathering place lies beneath the museum's tourist displays and polished signs, in a chamber filled with equipment, shelves, glass containers, and pale blue light. The robes move softly whenever someone shifts position. Cold stone presses through the soles of your shoes. Somewhere behind the walls, a pipe gives a small metallic knock, followed by the distant rotation of the fan. The room smells of candle wax, old paper, and electricity. Blue light gathers along the edges of glass tubes, turning each one into a narrow, luminous shape. No face can be clearly seen beneath the hoods. Only the movement of hands, the tilt of a head, or the quiet turning of a sleeve breaks the stillness. Before the society completes its ritual, lazy Susan Wentworth is brought into the chamber. She has reported seeing small bearded creatures, and her testimony has disturbed the comfortable surface of Gravity Falls. You stand near the edge of the room as she tries to explain what she saw. Figures too small to be ordinary men, with beards too large for their bodies and movements too quick for the eye to follow. The society listens without interruption. Its members do not laugh, argue, or demand proof. They simply watch lazy Susan with the patient attention of people who have heard similar accounts many times before. One hooded figure holds a labeled glass tube. Another places a hand upon the memory gun, a device designed to erase recollections. It looks mechanical and deliberate, made for a task practice, until it appears almost gentle. The chamber remains cool and still around you. Rainwater has traveled down through the museum above, leaving a narrow dark stain along one section of the stone. Pale blue illumination rises from the equipment and catches upon the curved surfaces of the tubes. The Society of the Blind Eye claims that the memories it removes are kept safe rather than destroyed. Its members speak as custodians, not executioners, and describe forgetting as a kindness offered to the people of Gravity Falls. Encounters with monsters, anomalies, and other disturbing events are taken from residents and placed into storage. The Society believes that a peaceful life can be built from everything a person no longer remembers. You watch as the memory gun is raised towards lazy Susan. The procedure is presented with strange tenderness. There is no shouting, struggle, or violent movement. The Society's members repeat their motto, speaking of becoming unseen and turning a blind eye. Their voices blend beneath the museum in a low, measured rhythm, each phrase making the act feel almost ordinary. A pale glow gathers at the end of the device. The labeled glass tube catches the light and shines blue along its rim. Lazy Susan stands beneath the hoods, unable to see the faces surrounding her. Her account of the small bearded creatures hangs unfinished in the room. For a moment, the memory appears almost visible, as though a strand of light has been drawn from the darkness behind her eyes. The chant continues softly. Its meaning settles over the chamber like dust. Become unseen. Turn a blind eye. Let the troubling thing pass beyond attention. The words are not shouted as commands, but murmured as reassurance. Beneath your feet, the museum remains full of objects meant to preserve history. Below it, the Society works to remove private histories from living minds. The memory gun extracts lazy Susan's recollection into the glass tube. A brief shimmer moves through the chamber, and the container fills with pale, trembling brightness. Her memory of the small bearded creatures is now sealed among countless others. After the procedure, she cannot remember what brought her to the Society. Her face relaxes into confusion, and the explanation that once seemed important has vanished. The blue light inside the tube moves like suspended mist. It gathers, loosens, and gathers again against the glass. Your fingers feel the cold of the underground air, while the stone beneath you seems to hold the warmth of the town above. The hooded figures remain motionless for several breaths, their robes forming a dark border around the light. Behind them, shelves rise into shadow, carrying more tubes, more labels, and more memories that no longer belong to the people who lived them. This is the first major image of the hidden society, the Hall of the Forgotten, where rows of memories are sealed away in tubes. The name is spoken with solemn pride. The society treats the hall as a vault, a place where dangerous knowledge can rest without harming anyone. Yet the shelves reveal something more unsettling. Gravity Falls has not become quiet because nothing happened. It has become quiet because its people have been taught, through force and ritual, to forget. You enter the Hall of the Forgotten with Dipper, Mabel, Suze, and Wendy. The passage opens into a vast storage area beneath the museum. Glass tubes stretch along the walls in orderly rows, each bearing a label. Some contain a dim blue spark. Others hold a drifting ribbon of light, slowly circling within the glass. The tubes are arranged like specimens, but each belongs to a person and a moment that once shaped a life. The floor is worn smooth where society members have walked across it for years. Cold stone stairs disappear behind you, leading back towards the public galleries. The underground air is dry in some places and damp in others. The ventilation fan turns beyond the shelves, its sound hidden and revealed as you pass between the rows. Pale blue light touches the robes, the labels, and the dust along the floor's edges. The brightness is quiet. It does not illuminate the whole room. Dipper begins to understand what the tubes represent. The memory gun has not been used only on strangers. The Society of the Blind Eye has removed memories from residents throughout Gravity Falls, gathering every disturbing encounter into its hidden hall. Mabel sees the scale of the collection and senses the sadness beneath its order. Suze and Wendy stand among the shelves, surrounded by evidence of a town made forgetful. Some labels describe creatures. Others refer to places, noises, shadows, and events without sensible names. Memories of monsters sit beside memories of strange machines and impossible discoveries. A tube may contain a single frightened glance, a conversation in the forest, or an entire night that has disappeared from someone's life. You move carefully between the shelves while blue light glides across your hands. Above, the museum continues its quiet work, unaware of what lies beneath its floors. The Society of the Blind Eye has given itself a name that suggests disappearance. Its members believe that what cannot be remembered cannot continue to trouble the town. They speak of becoming unseen, turning a blind eye, and preserving peace through absence. Their chants pass through the underground chambers in soft repetitions, never becoming loud enough to disturb the exhibitions above. Beyond the hall, the museum's displays remain arranged beneath their glass. Rain-dark timber surrounds the building. Dust rests beneath the cases. The town's history is presented in bright labels and careful paragraphs, while another history has been moved downstairs and sealed in blue glass. You can feel the difference between the two places without needing to see a door. Upstairs, history is displayed. Below, history is withheld. Dipper and Mabel realize that Gravity Falls' silence may have been manufactured. The town's strange reputation has not vanished because its people are foolish or careless. The residents have been made unable to connect their experiences. A monster seen by one person becomes a vague dream. An impossible machine becomes a missing afternoon. A warning becomes a blank expression and a forgotten journey. The thought moves through you as you stand in the hall of the forgotten. Blue tubes continue to glow. Labels hang from their wires, some neat and fresh, others stained with age. Dust lies in the narrow spaces beneath the shelves. The cold stairs remain behind you, and the distant fan turns with the same patient rhythm. Nothing in the hall appears hurried. The society has had years to make forgetting look like maintenance. The Society of the Blind Eye does not think of itself as cruel. Its members have built a philosophy around relief. They have seen what supernatural events do to ordinary people, and they have decided that ignorance is safer than fear. They remove memories of monsters, anomalies, and disturbing events, then place them in the Hall of the Forgotten beneath the museum. In the pale light, the Society's claim begins to sound almost reasonable. A person spared the memory of a monster may sleep more easily. A town unable to recall an impossible event may continue its work. A frightened witness may return to ordinary life without carrying the weight of what happened. Yet each sealed memory has also removed a piece of truth. Gravity Falls' quietness has been purchased from its people, one recollection at a time. The chamber seems larger when you stop moving. Glass tubes rise above your head, extending into the dimness. Blue light trembles along their surfaces. The sound of the fan reaches you through the shelves, slow and distant. Somewhere overhead, rain taps against the museum roof, softened by layers of stone and timber into a muted pattern beneath the floor. The air rests cool against your face. The dust beneath the cases upstairs feels impossibly far away. Dipper searches the labels and equipment for an explanation. Mabel studies the society's robes and the empty spaces between the shelves. Suze tries to understand the machines, while Wendy watches the hooded members with careful attention. Their discovery has changed shape. This is no longer only a story about erased memories. It is a story about people who decided that forgetting could become a civic duty. The society gathers around its devices and continues to speak of safety. The memory gun is placed back upon its stand. Glass tubes are carried towards their labeled positions. Lazy Susan has already left the chamber, unable to remember why she came. Her report about small bearded creatures has been reduced to a line on a label, another bright fragment among hundreds of others. Blue light rests inside the tubes like moonlight caught underwater. Some memories flicker sharply, while others drift in slow circles. The glass is smooth beneath your fingertips when you pass near a shelf, though touching the tubes feels forbidden by the silence around them. The robes make almost no sound. Every movement is muffled by stone, fabric, and distance. Even the ventilation fan seems to turn behind a layer of sleep. Dipper and Mabel follow the clues deeper into the society's history. The members' names remain hidden beneath their hoods, but the machinery suggests careful invention and long practice. The Society of the Blind Eye has not simply appeared beneath the museum. It has been built, expanded, and maintained by someone who understood both memory and fear. At the end of the Hall of the Forgotten, the twins find evidence pointing towards Fiddleford Hadron McGucket. McGucket, the eccentric old inventor of Gravity Falls, is not merely a witness to the Society's work. He is tied to its origin. The discovery changes the shape of the past once again, reaching beyond the hooded figures and their chants towards the man who helped create the means of forgetting. The final rows of tubes stand in a quieter part of the hall. Their blue light is faint. A few labels have curled at the corners. Dust has settled along the shelf edges, untouched except where careful hands have removed a memory and placed it back again. The fan turns somewhere far away. Its sound comes and goes, almost lost beneath the steady hush of the underground air. McGucket's connection waits among the records, the machines, and the sealed memories. Above, rain continues over the museum. The tourist signs remain bright. The timber walls hold the dark shine of water. Below, the Hall of the Forgotten keeps its blue lights burning. The stone is cold. The glass is pale. The fan turns slowly. And beneath Gravity Falls, the forgotten memories remain. You remain beneath Gravity Falls, where the blue lamps of the Hall of the Forgotten cast a patient glow across the stone floor. The air carries the cool mineral scent of underground walls, while a small fan turns above the records with a tired, circular murmur. Somewhere beyond the sealed chambers, rain continues over the museum, darkening its timber and silvering the tourist signs. The glass cases hold pale reflections, and the stone beneath your feet keeps the cold of the mountain. McGucket's connection waits among the records, the machines, and the sealed memories. His full name is Fiddleford Hadron McGucket, although nearly everyone in Gravity Falls calls him Old Man McGucket. The name appears in ledgers, faded photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes, each version carrying a different degree of certainty. Around you, the forgotten evidence rests quietly, as though these objects have learned to outlast the minds that once handled them. Before the junkyard, before the wild inventions and confused speech, Fiddleford Hadron McGucket worked as a research assistant. His work brought him into the orbit of Stanford Pines, a careful and ambitious scientist whose notebooks were filled with observations about Gravity Falls and its anomalies. Together, Stanford and McGucket worked on a universal portal, a machine intended to reach another dimension. The portal stood at the center of their efforts, humming with a promise neither man could safely measure. The remembered image is small at first. You see McGucket beside a table of instruments, his younger face narrowed by concentration, his hands moving quickly among wires and tools. Stanford stands nearby with a notebook open against his palm, watching the machine gather light. The portal's frame rises behind them in a ring of dark metal, and the air around it seems slightly misplaced. Even before the memory begins to fade, you sense the danger of a doorway designed for a place beyond ordinary maps. Outside the museum, the junkyard waits beneath the declining sun. Rust covers the discarded machinery in layered colors, from deep red to brown and soft orange. Old oil darkens the earth around abandoned vehicles, while sun-warmed metal releases a faint scent of dust and iron. The junkyard gate creaks whenever the wind presses against it, producing a long, uneven note between stacked appliances and broken farm equipment. Loose paper trembles beneath a tire, and a strip of faded fabric brushes a fence post with a whisper. You are standing among the heaps where McGucket has made his home, surrounded by objects that have survived longer than his memories. A refrigerator door leans against a tractor engine, its enamel marked by weather and scratches. Copper tubing coils through a wooden crate, and bent spoons glint beneath the shade of a collapsed awning. The ground holds fragments of machinery, broken radios, rusted signs, and gears whose original purposes have been forgotten. Every object seems to possess a history, although none can explain it. McGucket is introduced in the series as a local eccentric associated with the Gravity Falls junkyard. His appearance is unmistakable: wild hair, unruly clothing, and a beard that moves across his coat collar whenever he turns his head. A bandage may be visible among the tangled strands, appearing almost casually against the confusion of his face. In the original series, Alex Hirsch provides McGucket's voice, giving the character a restless rhythm that shifts between muttering, invention, alarm, and brief fragments of clarity. Now, standing beside the scrap piles, you hear that voice rising and falling through invented words. McGucket speaks as though several half-finished thoughts have collided inside him, leaving sounds that resemble language without remaining loyal to any dictionary. His phrases twist around one another, then dissolve into gestures and peculiar names. The children listen carefully, because beneath the nonsense there may be a useful word, a remembered place, or a small piece of truth hiding among the syllables. The late afternoon dust hangs in amber light above the yard, giving every object a softened edge. Particles drift through the open space between a rusted crane and a heap of bicycle frames. The metal beneath your hand is warm from the sun, though its rough surface leaves a reddish trace against your skin. A faint smell of old oil rises from the machinery, mingling with dry grass and the sharper odor of weathered wood. At the far boundary, the gate creaks once, settles, and then moves again in the breeze. The children ask McGucket to identify familiar faces and places. They hold up photographs, point towards sketches, and name locations around Gravity Falls with careful patience. One image shows a building he has passed many times, yet his expression suggests that its walls belong to a dream rather than a street. Another picture contains a face he recognizes only as a shape beneath a hat. The questions are simple, but the answers wander into invented language, sudden pauses, and gestures towards the sky. The difficulty is not merely that McGucket has forgotten names. Repeated memory loss has altered the pathways by which names, faces, and places once belonged together. He can recognize a curve of road without knowing where it leads, or identify a machine without recalling why it was built. A familiar face may appear before him as a collection of colors and angles. Meaning has been separated from appearance, leaving fragments that remain accurate while their connections have fallen away. A newspaper clipping provides the earliest usable clue. It has been softened by repeated folding, and the creases divide its printed image into narrow, uneven sections. The paper smells faintly of dust and old cupboards, with one corner darkened by age. Its headline concerns the Gravity Falls Museum of History, and the small photograph beneath the words seems to stir something in McGucket. His beard brushes his coat collar as he leans nearer, with the bandage still visible beneath the loose strands. The clipping lies between the children's fingers like a fragile map of the past. Its edges are thin, and a fold crosses the photograph where a face may once have been clear. The ink has faded unevenly, leaving darker letters beside pale grey blocks. When the paper moves, it gives a dry, delicate sound, like a leaf turned slowly in a quiet room. Around you, the junkyard remains bright and cluttered, but the clipping draws its scattered objects into a single direction. McGucket recognizes the museum's surroundings without understanding their meaning. He remembers a broad path, the angle of a sign, and the dark shape of timber beneath a wet roof. His hands sketch the outline of a building in the air, then pause beside an imaginary doorway. The children ask whether he has been inside, whether he knows the people pictured in the clipping, and whether the museum contains something connected with the society. His replies arrive in broken phrases and uncertain sounds. You travel with him towards the Gravity Falls Museum of History, carrying the folded clipping in a protective envelope. The road passes beneath tall trees whose branches gather the last pale light. Rainwater remains in shallow hollows beside the pavement, reflecting fragments of sky and passing leaves. McGucket walks with uneven determination, his coat shifting around his shoulders. Each step seems guided by recognition rather than memory, as though the ground itself is offering directions his mind can no longer provide. At the museum, the rain has left the timber walls dark and shining. Bright tourist signs stand near the entrance, promising local history in cheerful colors that seem almost too vivid beneath the gray afternoon. Water gathers along the stone steps, and the brass handle feels cold beneath your palm. Inside, the air is warmer, carrying traces of polish, damp wool, old paper, and the faint odor of display cases. The building creaks gently as the weather presses against it. The museum's corridors are arranged as a series of carefully preserved explanations. Glass cases contain tools, clothing, maps, household objects, and photographs of people whose names have become part of the town's official memory. McGucket moves past the displays with increasing uncertainty. He recognizes fragments of the museum and its surroundings, yet the recognition has no clear center. A staircase seems familiar, a portrait appears almost known, and a display label causes him to whisper a word that changes before it can be understood. The children place the newspaper clipping beside a display photograph. The proportions seem to match, although time has altered the building and the people who once stood outside it. A tree in the old image has grown wider, and the sign above the entrance has been repainted. McGucket studies the comparison with his head lowered. His beard brushes his collar in a soft, dry movement against the fabric. The bandage remains beside his cheek, a small fact carried steadily through the confusion. Within one recovered memory, you see McGucket standing outside the museum in younger clothing. The day is bright, and the trees around the building are smaller than they are now. Stanford is present near the steps, holding several papers against the wind. McGucket turns towards him with an expression of concern, while a third figure stands farther away beside a parked vehicle. The image trembles, loses color, and then returns, with the same bandage visible beneath McGucket's beard. A second memory shows the museum from the opposite side. The windows reflect a hard white sky, and a line of equipment rests beneath the eaves. McGucket bends over a device with wheels, while Stanford watches from a few paces away. The younger McGucket is speaking, but the sound is distorted by the damaged recollection. When he raises his head, the bandage is again present in his beard, placed at nearly the same angle as before. You pause over that bandage, because it remains when the surrounding details change. Clothing shifts, weather alters, and the people nearby become indistinct, yet the small strip of fabric stays beside McGucket's face. His mind has overlooked its reason, but the memory has retained the mark itself. A minor physical fact has traveled through several damaged scenes, preserving a thread that no explanation can immediately untangle. Outside the museum, the rain weakens to a fine mist. Drops cling to the railings and gather along the edges of the tourist signs, where the colors appear blurred through moisture. The pavement reflects the entrance lamps in long, trembling lines. Beneath the awning, the air smells of wet timber and cold stone. A distant vehicle passes along the road, its tires making a low hush over the damp surface before the sound disappears among the trees. McGucket eventually remembers the experiment that led to the bandage. He had been developing memory-erasing devices, searching for a way to remove knowledge that had become dangerous or unbearable. The bandage belongs to a separate incident, a minor injury that survived in the recollection after its surrounding circumstances had faded. It does not explain the central mystery, but it becomes a physical marker within the damaged scenes. Across several memories, the strip of fabric remains visible beneath his beard. The children realize that the damaged memories are not random. They have been shaped by deliberate forgetting, repeated whenever McGucket encountered information he could not bear to retain. Each erasure removed part of a connected story while leaving stray images behind. Faces became unfamiliar, places lost their names, and the order of events dissolved. What appears at first to be a natural mystery is instead the accumulated result of choices made again and again, each one narrowing the path back to the truth. McGucket later became associated with the Society of the Blind Eye, a group devoted to removing unwanted memories from the people of Gravity Falls. The Society's history lies behind layers of secrecy, altered recollection, and careful denial. McGucket can identify its signs and recognize its methods, but the larger history remains beyond his grasp. The episode presents him as unable to remember the Society's past clearly, even when the missing knowledge concerns his own earlier life. A museum corridor leads towards a room devoted to unusual local organizations. The floorboards answer each footstep with a muted creak, and the glass cases catch pale light from high windows. Dust remains suspended in the corners where the heating vents meet the walls. A display of old emblems rests beneath a printed description, its colors faded into browns and quiet greens. McGucket stands before it, moving his fingers as if counting invisible pieces of a mechanism. The words Society of the Blind Eye appear in several places, though never in a complete account. One label has been cut away from its frame, and another has been covered by a newer explanation. A photograph contains a row of faces, but several eyes have been scratched from the surface. McGucket looks from one image to another, muttering in his confused, invented language. The children ask him to identify familiar faces, and his hand rises towards the glass without touching it. Near the photograph, a narrow service passage opens towards a rear courtyard. McGucket recognizes the arrangement of doors, drains, and windows, although he cannot explain why. The courtyard stones are dark from rain, and a gutter releases a thin stream beside the wall. A wooden crate has swollen in the damp weather, its grain raised and uneven. The scent of wet paper emerges from a nearby storeroom, where old records have been kept close to the floor. You follow McGucket through that passage while the folded clipping rests safely inside its envelope. He stops beside a window and stares at the reflection of the courtyard. For a moment, the glass places his present face over the outline of his younger self. The two images overlap in a wavering shape, joined by the same beard, the same posture, and the same small bandage remembered from another time. Then the reflection shifts, and McGucket turns away. His speech grows more confused near the rear rooms. Words emerge in a mixture of shortened names, invented verbs, and sounds that seem to imitate machines. He speaks of eyes, doors, wires, and a place beneath the town, but their order changes whenever he approaches a meaningful detail. The children remain close, repeating the names of Stanford Pines, the Society of the Blind Eye, and the museum. Each name acts like a stone placed carefully along a difficult path. The room beyond the passage contains equipment recovered from abandoned buildings around Gravity Falls. Rusted instruments stand beneath dust covers, and several glass cylinders have been arranged beside a cracked wooden cabinet. The metal surfaces hold the warm brown color of age, while old oil has darkened the hinges and floorboards. A loose belt hangs from one machine, motionless now. When McGucket sees it, his hand reaches towards the control panel before his memory closes again. A younger McGucket appears in the reflection of the cabinet glass. He is seated beside Stanford at a workbench, surrounded by diagrams of the universal portal. The drawings show concentric rings, unstable currents, and measurements written in a hurried hand. Stanford points towards a section marked with a warning, while McGucket studies the figures with a mixture of excitement and dread. Their work is intended to reach another dimension, one connected with the anomalies gathered around Gravity Falls. The portal's early tests leave traces in the laboratory. Light bends across the metal frame, and the instruments respond with a trembling series of tones. Stanford stands at the edge of the room, while McGucket leans close to the machinery. The younger inventor's beard is shorter, his coat is cleaner, and his hands move with the precision of someone who still trusts memory. A bandage remains in the beard, suggesting that even this earlier scene belongs after the injury. You stand beside the old workbench as the recovered image folds and unfolds. The portal is no longer a doorway, but a pale outline suspended between the laboratory and the museum room. Stanford's face becomes a reflection in the glass, and McGucket's voice loses its ordinary shape. The children's questions continue in the present, asking whether the portal led to the society, whether Stanford knew what would happen, and whether McGucket chose to forget. The answers do not arrive as a single revelation. Instead, small details settle beside one another, like objects arranged across a work table. The newspaper clipping points towards the museum. The museum reveals places McGucket remembers without understanding. The bandage connects separate memories to the same period. The society explains the missing history, while the portal explains why the knowledge may have become dangerous. Each clue remains incomplete, but together they begin to describe a life, divided by its own attempts at safety. Rain returns against the museum windows in a delicate pattern. The drops gather, join, and descend through the reflected lamps, making the outside world appear to move slowly downwards. Along the corridor, framed maps curl slightly at their corners. The floor gives back a soft scent of wax and damp wood. Somewhere in the building, a pipe expands with a quiet metallic tick. The sound disappears into the larger hush, leaving the displays undisturbed. McGucket stands before a case containing an old photograph of the portal laboratory. The image is faded, but the younger man beside Stanford can still be recognized by his posture and broad, thoughtful hands. A line of equipment runs behind them, leading towards the circular frame of the machine. The photograph has no dramatic movement, bright disturbance, or clear explanation. It offers only quiet evidence that McGucket once belonged to work he can no longer describe. He raises one hand towards the glass, stopping just before his fingers touch the surface. His expression changes as the eccentric mask loosens for a moment. Beneath the wild hair and tangled beard, you can almost recognize the inventor who measured impossible energies beside Stanford Pines. The name Fiddleford Hadron McGucket seems to return through the layers of Old Man McGucket, not fully restored, but no longer entirely lost. The children stand nearby without speaking. Their earlier questions have become softer, and the museum's silence gives each object more room. McGucket's coat collar shifts as he breathes, brushing lightly against his beard. The bandage remains where it has appeared in every recovered memory, modest and stubborn beneath the loose hair. It does not explain the entire story, yet it proves that the story has a body, a sequence, and a past that forgetting could not completely erase. Beyond the case, the museum's displays continue into shadow. An empty frame holds a rectangle of darker wall, and a brass plaque has lost several letters from its inscription. The old photographs show roads, buildings, machines, and people who once believed that knowledge could be controlled by careful hands. Outside, water moves along the gutters, carrying leaves past the foundation. Inside, the air is still enough for the smallest sounds to remain distinct. McGucket turns from the photograph and looks towards the corridor leading back to the entrance. He recognizes the direction, though its reason remains uncertain. The children follow at a measured pace, carrying the folded newspaper clipping and the understanding it has provided. The museum behind them holds the image of his younger self, while the junkyard waits beyond the wet road with its rust, oil, and patient heaps of forgotten machinery. At the doorway, the last daylight has thinned to a muted grey. The tourist signs continue to shine above the steps, bright against the rain-darkened timber. McGucket's beard brushes his coat collar once more as he descends, and the bandage shows pale beneath the strands. His invented language rises softly, then breaks apart before reaching a complete sentence. Yet among the strange sounds, the name Stanford Pines can be heard, followed by a quieter attempt at Fiddleford. The path back passes beneath trees heavy with water. Leaves release drops onto the pavement, one after another, while the road reflects the lamps in broken lines. The air has cooled, and the scent of wet earth replaces the warmth of the museum. Behind you, the building settles into the evening, its timber walls holding their dark shine. Ahead, the junkyard gate creaks as the wind finds it again. Within the cluttered yard, discarded machinery rests beneath the fading sky. Rusted gears lie beside old engines, and a row of metal chairs collects rain along their seats. The smell of old oil rises from the ground, mingling with cold iron and the dry odor of paper. The late afternoon dust has vanished from the amber light, leaving only dampness and the soft reflections of distant lamps. Objects remain where they were, waiting without impatience. McGucket returns to the place where his memories have scattered most widely. The junkyard contains remnants of inventions, experiments, and repairs, although he cannot always distinguish one from another. A machine may have been built for the portal, for the society, or for an ordinary task whose purpose disappeared long ago. His hand settles on a rusted panel, and the metal gives a faint sound beneath his fingers. Recognition passes through him like a shadow beneath water. The old man looks towards the museum, though its walls are hidden beyond the trees. For a brief moment, the present and the past occupy the same quiet space. You can see the eccentric of the junkyard, the confused member of the Society of the Blind Eye, the research assistant beside Stanford, and the young inventor before the universal portal. Each figure belongs to McGucket, and none can entirely replace the others. A small piece of paper slips from the envelope and lands near your feet. Its folded surface has softened through repeated handling, and one crease has nearly divided it in two. When you lift it, the paper feels lighter than the history it carries. The inked museum photograph is blurred at the edges, but the building remains identifiable. Its surroundings, once recognized only as fragments, now form a quiet route through the past. McGucket watches the clipping with uncertain concentration. His voice becomes less scattered, and the invented words recede for several seconds. He says the name of the museum, then speaks Stanford's name, then attempts his own. The sequence is incomplete, but it is deliberate. The bandage rests in his beard, a mark that has survived where explanations have failed. His younger self is still beneath the confusion. The gate creaks across the yard, opening slightly before the wind allows it to close. Old Metal answers with a low groan, and the sound travels through the heaps of machinery. Somewhere beneath a tarp, rain strikes a hollow container in a slow, uneven rhythm. The coat collar moves against McGucket's beard as he lowers his head. Around you, rust, oil, paper, and wet timber gather into the familiar atmosphere of the junkyard. The evidence of his younger self remains in the museum, preserved by glass and fading ink. The portal remains in the broken diagrams, the society in the incomplete records, and the injury in the bandage that memory did not remove. McGucket stands among the machines, with the newspaper clipping held carefully in one hand. His face is still uncertain, but the old inventor has almost come into view. Night settles over Gravity Falls by slow degrees. The trees become dark shapes around the yard, and the museum lights diminish behind the rain. The road quiets, while water continues along the gutters and beneath the gate. A final trace of warmth lingers in the metal where the afternoon sun had rested. The air touches your face with a cool, clean movement, carrying the scent of wet earth and old oil. Fiddleford Hadron McGucket remains beside the discarded machinery, no longer entirely hidden by the name Old Man McGucket. The newspaper clipping lies against his coat, soft from repeated folding. His beard brushes the collar as he breathes, and the small bandage shows beneath it like a pale stitch through time. Somewhere inside him, Stanford Pines is waiting beside a machine. The portal is gathering light, and the museum holds the photograph of the man he once was. The junkyard gate gives one last quiet creak before becoming still. Around you, the rusted objects settle beneath the darkness, preserving their shapes without preserving their purposes. The museum keeps its blue lights burning below the mountain, and the Hall of the Forgotten remains cool, pale, and silent. McGucket's half-remembered clues lie between those places, fragile as paper, persistent as metal, and patient as the night. You are standing outside the Gravity Falls Museum of History after closing, beneath a sky washed thinly with moonlight. The great windows reflect only darkness, while the painted sign, above the entrance, hangs motionless against the brickwork. Inside, the exhibits wait behind glass, their labels carefully printed, their objects arranged to suggest that the town's past can be measured and safely displayed. A little dust rests along the skirting boards, and the polished floor holds a dull reflection of the emergency lamps. The air smells faintly of varnish, wool, and old paper. Somewhere beyond the galleries, a cooling pipe ticks at regular intervals, like a patient finger touching wood. The museum is closed to visitors, yet it does not feel empty. Behind the public rooms, another history is awake. You move through the entrance hall with Mabel, Dipper, Wendy, Suze, and McGucket, each figure softened by the weak blue light. The displays rise around you like quiet witnesses, showing pioneer tools, faded maps, carved household objects, and photographs of early residents. Their faces have been fixed in solemn poses, though some eyes seem to follow the movement in the glass. Dipper carries the suspicion that the museum is more than a collection of harmless relics. McGucket walks near the rear wall, muttering fragments that sound like directions remembered by the body before the mind can explain them. Mabel's sleeve brushes against a case of silver spoons, and the tiny sound travels farther than it should. Wendy keeps her hand near the flashlight at her belt. Suze closes the door behind you, and the latch settles with a soft, metallic click. A display of local architecture stands at the end of the western gallery, showing a miniature version of the old mansion on the hill. Its windows are painted black, and its narrow staircase has been carved with extraordinary care. McGucket stops beside the model, lifts one trembling finger, and points beneath its tiny front porch. The wooden platform conceals a brass plate shaped like a crossed-out eye. Dipper kneels and studies the symbol, recognizing it from scattered notes and damaged records. The mark belongs to a society that does not appear in the museum's official catalogues. You place your hand against the frame, feeling the chill of the glass, while McGucket searches the skirting board. A hidden catch gives way beneath his thumb. The entire display shifts inward by a fraction, revealing a locked iron door behind the exhibit. The iron door is narrow and blackened, its hinges marked by orange traces of rust. A cord of dust lies across the threshold, unbroken until Suze turns the key McGucket produces from his coat. The lock resists, then opens with a deep, reluctant clunk. Cold air moves out through the gap, carrying the damp odor of earth and the faint chemical smell of old machinery. You step through first, entering a passage that seems too small to have been built beneath such a spacious museum. Brickwork presses close on either side, wet in places where the mountain has found its way through. The floor slopes gently downward, and each footfall disappears into the darkness ahead. Behind you, the museum's blue lights become a thin line beneath the door. The public history remains above, while the concealed history begins beneath your feet. The passage continues behind the walls of the historical attraction, turning beneath galleries that display the town's respectable beginnings. You descend a short stairway with a rope fixed along one side, its fibers rough beneath your gloved hands. McGucket leads the way, recognizing old marks scratched into the brick. Some resemble arrows, while others appear to be names interrupted by sudden lines. Water gathers in shallow hollows, and the soles of your shoes disturb a skin of fine grit. The tunnel walls are close enough that Wendy's shoulder occasionally brushes the stone. Mabel's flashlight catches small metal brackets, rusted pipes, and bundles of electrical wire disappearing into the ceiling. Echoes traveling through the hollow corridors make every movement seem accompanied by another, slower group below. At the bottom of the stairs, the tunnel widens into a records chamber supported by timber posts. Shelves fill the walls from floor to ceiling, each carrying rows of glass tubes sealed with dark corks. Pale fluid glimmers inside them, though the contents do not remain still. In one tube, a summer afternoon seems to turn endlessly beneath the glass. Another holds the red blur of a swinging lantern. A third contains the emotional weight of a funeral, visible only as a grey pressure moving through the liquid. Names are written in uneven ink across paper tags tied to the tubes. Some belong to familiar residents, while others have faded into illegibility. The chamber smells of wet wood, dust, and the faintly bitter residue of chemical preservation. Dipper lifts a tube labeled with the name of a local shopkeeper, holding it close to the beam of his flashlight. Within the glass, a narrow street appears beneath falling snow, though no snow lies anywhere in the chamber. The image shifts when Dipper turns the tube, revealing a frightened expression, a door half open in darkness, and a blue shape passing behind the window. The memory is not merely a picture. It carries the sensation of cold, the pressure of fear, and the uncertain knowledge that something has been waiting outside. Dipper places the tube carefully on the shelf and looks along the rows. The stored memories may be a key to the mysteries of Gravity Falls, preserving experiences that official history has removed or concealed. You stand beside shelves, bearing the names of residents who still walk through the town streets. Each tube suggests an absent chapter, a moment cut away from an otherwise ordinary life. One contains the memory of a child seeing footprints appear across a ceiling. Another holds the sound of singing beneath a frozen lake. A third preserves the warm terror of a hand closing around an ankle in a dark forest. The fluid inside the glass gives off no light of its own, yet the recollections shine faintly when the room grows still. Paper labels curl at their edges, and the uneven ink has run wherever moisture touched it. Around you, the records breathe in silence, while distant drops fall through the masonry with the patient rhythm of a clock. The shelves are divided by old wooden partitions, creating narrow lanes between the records. Mabel moves slowly along one aisle, reading names aloud in a whisper before stopping herself. Wendy examines the seals, noticing that some tubes have been opened and closed many times. Suze discovers a rack labeled with the word relief, written in large, careful letters. McGucket stares at it for a long while, then lowers his head. These residents came to the society because unwanted memories had become heavier than ordinary life. They sought relief from visions, sounds, and knowledge that followed them through waking hours. The organization promised quiet by removing what could not be endured. In this underground headquarters, forgetting has been arranged as a service. A second chamber lies beyond the records, reached through an archway reinforced with iron bands. The walls there are plastered rather than brick, and a row of small chairs faces a table holding empty vials. Some chairs have been worn smooth by repeated use. Others remain untouched beneath a film of pale dust. On the far wall, the crossed-out eye appears again, painted in black above a series of numbered cabinets. Blind Ivan's name is written beneath the symbol, followed by dates extending across several decades. Dipper traces one date with his finger and sees that it corresponds to an event mentioned nowhere in the museum's public displays. The organization has lasted through generations, passing its burden from one custodian to another. Blind Ivan enters without announcing himself, and the chamber seems to contract around his presence. Is a thin elderly man in a dark coat, with a cloth covering one eye and a calm expression that contains neither anger nor surprise. The crossed-out eye is sewn into the fabric over his face, its black lines neat and deliberate. He carries a long metal case in both hands, treating it with the care given to an instrument of ritual. He does not resemble a conventional monster. Nothing about his posture is wild, and nothing in his voice rises above a measured, almost courteous tone. Blind Ivan appears instead as a custodian of silence, a man who has spent so long guarding absence that he has come to regard forgetting as mercy. The society gathers behind him in the doorway, their faces familiar from the town above. A librarian stands beside a farmer, and the owner of a small cafe keeps one hand against the wall. They are residents who have carried unwanted memories into this place, hoping to set them down. Their eyes move towards the tubes bearing their names, then away again. Blind Ivan explains that supernatural knowledge is a burden that should be removed before it can destroy the ordinary shape of a life. The society erases memories from other townspeople and from itself. Each member has surrendered something, perhaps a face, a warning, or the reason for a fear that remains after its cause has vanished. A soft, mechanical hum begins inside the metal case. Blind Ivan places it upon the table and opens two latches. The device within resembles a compact gun, though its barrel is ringed with glass and copper wire. A small dial turns by itself, settling beneath a line-marked memory. Its faint chemical smell mingles with the odor of damp earth, and the air around it feels dry against your skin. Mabel takes one step closer, then stops when Wendy reaches across her. Sue studies the apparatus with uneasy admiration. McGucket whispers that the machine once had another name, one he cannot recover. Blind Ivan rests his fingers on the case and says that the society's secrets belong to the organization, not to the people who discover them. Dipper opens the notebook he has carried through the museum, comparing the dates beneath the crossed-out eye with the labels on the tubes. He finds references to disappearances, unusual storms, and a night when every clock in town stopped together. The records do not explain the mysteries, but they preserve the impressions of people who stood near them. Dipper understands that the memories form a hidden map of gravity falls, with each erased experience marking a place where the town's supernatural history has touched ordinary lives. He turns towards Blind Ivan and asks about the mansion, the museum, and the missing chapters in McGucket's recollections. The leader answers that curiosity is only another form of weight when it is allowed to remain. The society moves behind you, quietly closing the archway through which you entered. No one reaches for a weapon, and no one speaks loudly. Their restraint makes the chamber more uneasy, because it suggests that this procedure has been performed many times. A woman carrying a ring of keys removes a tube from the shelf and places it upon the table. The label bears her own name. She looks at it without recognition, then touches the ink with 2 fingers. The memory inside shows a red door beneath the old mansion, opening onto a room filled with stars. Her expression changes for the briefest moment, as though an emotion has survived after its explanation was erased. The tube returns to its place, and the chamber becomes still again. You are surrounded by shelves holding the preserved lives of Gravity Falls. Glass catches the flashlight in thin white lines, while the dark fluid within each tube gathers and loosens like smoke beneath water. The uneven names seem to lean towards you from their paper tags. Some have been written carefully, with dates and locations. Others are only hurried marks, made by hands that may have been shaking. The records carry the texture of old fear, the warmth of remembered rooms, and the sudden emptiness that follows forgetting. Damp earth presses against the tunnel walls beyond the chamber, and a faint vibration travels through the floor whenever the machinery turns. Above you, the museum's exhibits remain arranged beneath their cases, preserving objects while the society preserves what people no longer remember. Blind Ivan asks who has touched the records. His voice remains gentle, though every member of the society turns towards Dipper. The notebook lies open beside the tube, bearing the shopkeeper's name. Mabel reaches for it, but a society member steps between them. Wendy shifts her weight, and Suze raises both hands in a gesture meant to show that he has no intention of causing trouble. McGucket begins to speak about the old mansion, then loses the thread and laughs once under his breath. The sound echoes through the hollow corridor and returns altered, as though another voice has borrowed it. Blind Ivan says that the group has been caught investigating records never meant to leave the underground headquarters. The confrontation joins 2 histories that the town has kept apart. Above the chamber, the Gravity Falls Museum of History presents a tidy account of settlement, invention, and civic progress. Below it, the society stores the memories of impossible events, preserving the supernatural history that official displays cannot contain. The mansion on the hill appears in both accounts, though its public model shows only painted windows and carved walls. Beneath the museum, its hidden rooms are linked to red doors, missing hours, and residents who have forgotten why certain places make them afraid. Dipper sees that the museum is not merely a visible entrance to the investigation. It is a cover for the archive, and the archive is a second map beneath the first. Blind Ivan lifts the memory gun from its case. The copper coils give a low, rising whine, and a pale ring of light forms around the barrel. No one moves as he points it towards the group. The machine is not aimed at one person alone. Its narrow beam passes across Dipper, Mabel, Wendy, and Suze, then rests against McGucket's coat. The old inventor's face becomes unreadable in the blue glow. Blind Ivan says that the children's memories can be erased before the night becomes more dangerous. He speaks of sleep, breakfast, and familiar streets, promising that morning will arrive without the weight of secret knowledge. The society members lower their eyes, as though they have heard the promise before. A cold draft slips through the room from somewhere beneath the floor, carrying the mineral scent of underground water. The wooden shelves creak one after another, and small reflections move along the glass tubes. Rope fibers remain rough beneath your gloved hands where you steady yourself against a post. The tunnel beyond the chamber carries distant footsteps, though every society member stands within sight. A bead of moisture travels down the iron band around the archway, gathering dust before falling soundlessly. The old machinery exhales a bitter trace of oil and metal. Shadows gather beneath the table, close to the feet of the memory gun. Nothing in the chamber breaks. Yet the whole headquarters seems balanced upon the edge of a quiet change. Dipper looks towards the tubes again and understands that the society's greatest weakness is also its deepest sorrow. The records do not belong to the organization alone, because each label names a person who once carried the memory inside a living mind. Blind Ivan may claim ownership of the secrets, but the preserved experiences began with residents who were frightened, curious, or unable to bear what they had seen. Mabel reaches for Dipper's hand, and Wendy steps closer to McGucket. Suze notices a lever beneath the table, marked with the same crossed-out eye. The mechanism may control the chamber doors, or it may release every memory at once. The choice remains hidden behind rust and darkness. Blind Ivan's thumb settles against the trigger. The machine's ring brightens, casting thin white bands across the walls and the labeled tubes. In the glass, forgotten scenes flicker faster, showing forests, bedrooms, staircases, and figures standing where no figure should be. One tube bears the name McGucket, written in a younger hand. Inside it, a wide room fills with brilliant yellow light, and a man kneels beside a machine shaped like a doorway. McGucket sees the image and begins to remember. His breath catches, and the old coat trembles around his shoulders. Blind Ivan turns the barrel slightly, warning that one movement will be enough to remove the memory from every mind in the chamber. The society members remain silent, but their silence no longer feels united. The cafe owner looks at the tube bearing her name. The librarian studies the floor. A farmer near the doorway touches the place where a missing recollection has left an ache. These people have accepted the society's rule because forgetting seemed kinder than remembering. Yet the gun now points towards them as readily as it points towards the children. The organization erases memories from townspeople and from itself, but the promise of relief has become a commandment. Blind Ivan guards the quiet by threatening to widen it. Around you, the preserved experiences move behind glass, waiting for someone to decide whether knowledge can be returned. Dipper speaks about the dates in the records, naming the years one by one. He mentions the old mansion, the stopped clocks, the winter footprints, and the blue shape beyond the shopkeeper's door. Each detail causes a different tube to stir. Blind Ivan's expression remains composed, though the hand holding the memory gun tightens. Dipper says that the memories are not meaningless pain. Together, they reveal what happened in Gravity Falls, and they may explain why the town has survived so many impossible events. The leader answers that explanation does not make a burden lighter. His words drift through the chamber, formal and weary, like a sentence repeated across generations. The light from the machine reaches the ceiling and fades into the timber beams. Dust turns slowly within it, rising and falling without a clear direction. The glass tubes cast thin shadows over the labels, making some names appear doubled. Beyond the walls, water moves through the mountain in a hidden channel. You hear its muted passage beneath the rough scrape of old pipes and the small clicks of cooling metal. The air holds the smell of wet stone, cork, and machinery that has been used too often. A loose strand from the rope hangs beside your hand, soft at the tip and coarse near the knot. The chamber seems to contain both the warmth of remembered life and the chill of deliberate absence. Mabel notices the lever beneath the table and distracts Blind Ivan by asking about the society's earliest records. Her voice remains light, yet the question reaches the oldest part of the room. She asks whether the first members erased their own memories because they feared the supernatural, or because they feared what they had done with it. Blind Ivan's face turns towards her, and for a moment the cloth over his eye seems to deepen the darkness around him. Wendy moves one pace across the floor. Suze reaches beneath the table. McGucket clutches the tube bearing his name. Dipper closes the notebook, keeping its evidence safe against his chest. The lever moves with a sudden metallic snap. Every tube in the chamber flashes at once, and the headquarters fills with overlapping fragments of vision. You see the old mansion beneath summer rain, a hidden stairway, a child running through a hall, and a circle of symbols beneath the museum floor. Emotional impressions pass through the room like changes in temperature. Fear chills your arms, grief settles behind your ribs, and a brief, impossible happiness warms the air before vanishing. The machine shrieks once, then falls silent. The memory gun drops from blind Ivan's hand and strikes the table. Corks tremble in their sockets, while the names on the labels blur beneath a sudden veil of condensation. For one breath, the society's stored memories return to the people who once carried them. The cafe owner remembers the red door, and the librarian remembers a voice beneath the lake. The farmer recalls seeing stars inside the old mansion, though the mansion has no room large enough to contain them. McGucket remembers the doorway machine and the reason he built it, but the knowledge retreats before he can speak. Blind Ivan stands beneath the crossed-out eye with his head bowed. His silence is no longer a shield. It is the shape of a man who has discovered that the burden he removed may still be waiting within him. The children gather around the table, breathing carefully as the chamber settles. Dipper finds a cabinet hidden behind the lowest shelf, its door marked with a date that appears several times in the records. Inside lies a bundle of maps showing tunnels beneath the museum, the mansion, and the town square. Lines connect the locations in a pattern resembling an eye crossed through with a blade. The maps confirm that the public historical attraction is the visible entrance point for a much older investigation. The museum displays what the town is willing to remember, while the headquarters holds what it has tried to forget. Dipper folds the maps beneath his notebook. The memory tubes remain behind him, labeled with residents' names, each holding a vision that may someday be needed again. Blind Ivan retrieves the gun and points it towards the group once more. The beam remains dim, but its presence is enough to quiet every voice. He says the society cannot allow the records to leave, and that tomorrow must feel ordinary. The promise sounds less like comfort now than a carefully maintained illusion. In the museum above, lights will come on for visitors. Guides will repeat familiar dates, and children will stand beside the model of the old mansion without knowing what lies beneath it. In the underground rooms, the tubes will return to darkness. The erased memories will wait in silence, while blind Ivan and his society guard the trail beneath the old mansion. The underground rooms remain quiet, and beneath the old mansion, the tubes return to darkness, carrying their small, labeled portions of the past. Beyond the guarded passage, another chamber waits beneath the stone. Copper coils rest upon a wooden frame, while thin wires descend into a metal casing. You are standing beside McGucket's workbench, where warm copper coils hold the faint scent of oil, dust, and old rain. A blue-white electrical glow trembles inside a glass chamber, touching the surrounding tools with a cold, patient radiance. Water falls somewhere beyond the workbench, one drop at a time, each sound traveling through the cave with rounded softness. Cool glass lies beneath your fingertips as you pass one of the removable tubes. Its surface is smooth, except for a paper label tied around the neck. Inside the tube, a pale shimmer gathers and loosens, turning slowly as though a thought were attempting to remember its own shape. Reels turn inside a metal casing near the floor, making a delicate clicking rhythm beneath the deeper dripping water. Nothing in the apparatus appears grand enough to govern a human mind, yet every screw, dial, coil, and wire has been arranged for that purpose. The device is McGucket's memory gun, a mechanical construction born from patient craft, nervous curiosity, and a purpose that sounds almost merciful. It does not erase a person's entire identity in a single violent act, nor does it empty the mind as one might empty a locked room. Instead, the memory gun removes selected memories, choosing one recollection at a time through the careful movement of a dial. The selector dial clicks beneath your hand, passing through small engraved marks that correspond to experiences hidden somewhere behind the subject's eyes. A beam then leaves the device and crosses the space between the machine and its target, carrying away the chosen memory. The effect is represented by that beam, narrow and bright, as though forgetting were a physical substance traveling through the air. At its end, the memory is transferred into a removable tube, where it can be labeled, stored, and later replayed. The work is precise enough to suggest medicine, although its results may be more uncertain than any physician would willingly accept. McGucket has built an instrument that can separate one moment from the long fabric of a life, leaving the remaining pattern temporarily intact. At first, the machine seems to offer relief from pain, embarrassment, terror, or knowledge that has become too heavy to bear. A person may lose the sight of a monster, the sound of an impossible voice, or the image of a place that should not exist. The blank space left behind can resemble peace, particularly when nobody asks what has been removed or why the absence feels familiar. Beneath gravity falls the distinction between forgetting and being made to forget begins to disappear into the steady machinery. The Society of the Blind Eye uses the memory gun on people who have witnessed supernatural events, preserving the town's ordinary appearance through engineered ignorance. Its members also use the gun upon themselves, passing the beam across their own faces when private knowledge grows inconvenient or frightening. In this way, the machine does not merely protect secrets from outsiders. It protects the society from the burden of remembering them. Within the cave, the stored tubes form a quiet archive, arranged according to labels and shelves, while the minds that produce them become increasingly uncertain. One tube contains a frightened face, its expression suspended in blue-white light, with the moment of recognition held forever inside glass. Another preserves the broken rhythm of a road accident, metal folding against metal, while a distant hillside remains unchanged. A third offers the image of a workbench, where McGucket stands beside Stanford beneath a wash of electrical brightness. The archive appears orderly, but the life inside it has not been orderly for many years. The memory gun has a dial for particular memories, yet no dial can measure the connections between one memory and another. Removing a single moment may leave behind a question without an answer, a fear without an origin, or a friendship without a name. You can forget the reason for grief while continuing to carry the grief, like a stone whose shape has been hidden. The machine's purpose sounds almost gentle because it acts upon moments rather than bodies, but its kindness depends upon what the mind can survive without. At the far side of the chamber, McGucket's handwriting appears on a row of labels, crowded, slanting, and increasingly difficult to read. Some dates are clear, while others have been crossed out and written again, as though the past itself had begun to move beneath his pen. The first tubes bear practical descriptions, recording observations, accidents, and encounters with beings the town would prefer to call impossible. Later labels become shorter, stranger, and more personal, marking fragments with words such as father, machine, promise, and Stanford. The name Stanford appears again beside another tube, then once more on a narrow strip of paper folded around a vial. The repeated name rests among the shelves like a loose thread, waiting for someone to notice that it belongs to several different memories. McGucket repeatedly uses the device on his own memories, and each use creates another empty space within the account of his former life. One memory removes an argument, another removes a warning, and another removes the reason he began working beside Stanford. With every beam, some immediate distress disappears, but the structure surrounding that distress loses another supporting piece. A habit begins as an answer to a particular problem, then becomes a convenient answer to every problem resembling the first. One use becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a way of life, until the machine stands nearer to McGucket than any ordinary companion. His experiments with the memory gun become associated with the deterioration of his mental state, although the exact boundary between cause and consequence remains difficult to find. The more he removes, the less confidently he can describe what he once understood. The less he understands, the more often he returns to the device. The archive grows while its creator becomes less able to carry the memories that give the archive meaning. You move farther into the cave, where the ceiling lowers and the air feels cool against your face. Drops gather along the dark stone before falling into shallow pools, creating small circles that widen and vanish beneath the next drop. A strip of blue-white light lies across the floor, reflected from the machine's glass components and broken by uneven rock. Copper coils retain a quiet warmth, and the metal smells faintly sweet, like old coins held inside a closed drawer. The selector dial is still, but its engraved markings catch the light as you pass, each one resembling a small doorway. Behind the casing, reels turn with a subdued mechanical murmur, winding and rewinding, invisible sequences through the apparatus. The tubes stand in narrow rows, their cool glass shoulders touching one another, while their paper labels hang without movement. A distant current moves through the wires, producing a delicate vibration that can be felt more easily than heard. Nothing here is entirely silent, because the cave keeps speaking through water, metal, electricity, and the slow settling of dust. The workbench is scarred by years of use, and beneath its surface lie curled wires, discarded gears, and fragments of polished glass. A brass tool has been left beside a loose screw, suggesting that McGucket expected to return before the next memory was ready. Along the wall, shallow niches hold tubes that have gathered a faint film of moisture, making their labels blur at the edges. The cave's steady dripping water continues beyond the machinery, indifferent to the difference between a remembered event and an empty place. Here, the past no longer behaves like something invisible, private, or unreachable. It has acquired weight and storage. The children enter the archive cautiously, moving between the shelves while the memory gun rests behind them on its wooden frame. They do not begin with a complete story, since no complete story has survived inside McGucket's mind or among the labeled tubes. Instead, they view the stored material one piece at a time, allowing each recovered memory to open into another room. The first room resembles a workshop, where McGucket works with Stanford amid tools, sketches, and the restless glow of unfinished machinery. The image does not explain everything, but it establishes a connection McGucket himself can no longer comfortably describe. The children see the two men leaning over a project whose purpose appears larger than the cramped room containing it. A portal takes shape within the recovered material, its frame surrounded by wiring, instruments, and the blue-white brightness of unstable energy. The portal project belongs to McGucket's lost past, and its appearance changes the meaning of every earlier label. The machine that once seemed to belong only to forgetting now stands beside a device intended to open a passage beyond the familiar world. Memory becomes a corridor between rooms, carrying the children from the workbench to the portal, from the portal to a frightened face, and from that face to a road accident. Each scene supplies a portion of the larger history, though the portions do not arrive in chronological order. A road accident suggests consequence without naming its cause, while a frightened face suggests discovery without revealing what was seen. A workbench reveals companionship, but the removed argument beside it has left the relationship incomplete. The children assemble McGucket's history piece by piece, using the tubes as evidence and the gaps between them as another kind of evidence. They learn that the archive is physical, and that physical things can be sorted, counted, misplaced, or discovered after years of neglect. A memory can be stored beneath a label, carried through a corridor, placed inside a niche, and summoned again by someone else. The Hall of the Forgotten gives this process an official shape, turning private absence into a collection that can be guarded and inspected. Within that hall, the Society of the Blind Eye preserves what it removes, even when its members pretend that removal has ended the matter. The tubes make forgetting visible, giving the children a way to question the town's smooth surface. Every recovered image carries the possibility that another person once stood nearby, holding the gun, turning the dial, or watching the beam. A witness may have seen something supernatural, then lost the sight itself, leaving only an unease that could not be placed. A society member may have erased the memory of an operation, then forgotten why the empty tube felt important. The device demonstrates that forgetting in gravity falls can be engineered, adjusted, repeated, and stored beneath the ordinary streets. The discovery does not make every absence understandable, because a removed memory can take its context with it. Still, the children now possess a method for approaching the truth, and the truth begins to gather around McGucket's former life. He once worked with Stanford, and the Portal Project occupied a place among his days that his own experiments had hidden from him. The name Stanford returns through several recordings, each occurrence carrying a different weight, from professional partnership to distant personal loss. McGucket's lost past is not one missing object, but a landscape from which whole buildings have been carefully removed. The memory gun has made that landscape incomplete, yet the tubes preserve enough fragments for its outlines to appear. Beyond the shelves, the cave grows darker, though the machine continues to cast its narrow electrical light across the stone. The beam's pale reflection lies along the walls like water that has forgotten how to move. Warm copper coils glow near their centers, fading towards their outer turns, where dust rests between the ridges. A thin layer of moisture covers the rock, and the air carries the mineral scent of underground water. The selector dial gives a small click when the machinery settles, although nobody has touched it for several minutes. Inside the metal casing, reels turn at a measured speed, drawing strips of recorded light across hidden lenses. Cool glass presses against your palm as you lift another tube, and the faint image within bends around the curve. Some labels are written in careful block letters, while others have been hurriedly tied with thread around the narrow necks. The droplets striking the pools make a patient rhythm, soft enough to mingle with the low hum of electricity. A loose wire trembles against the casing, producing a faint metallic tick that disappears whenever the reels change direction. The cave seems to hold the apparatus in suspension, as though the machine and its memories have been placed outside ordinary time. Dust lies along the shelves, but the labels remain legible, protected by the same darkness that conceals them. The children continue through the recovered material, and each viewing creates a new arrangement of the facts. They see McGucket's hands moving over the portal controls, steady and capable before later confusion begins to appear. They see Stanford near the machine, occupied by calculations, diagrams, and the belief that knowledge can be reached through sufficient preparation. They see an accident, or perhaps its aftermath, with a road divided by scattered fragments and a face turned towards the impossible. They see fear entering the workroom, not as a single clear event, but as a change in posture and silence. The images are not explanations, yet they possess the stubborn authority of things that happened before anyone learned to describe them. McGucket's former life approaches through these fragments, never arriving all at once, but becoming more recognizable with every recovered detail. The children begin to understand that his strange behavior is not merely a collection of harmless eccentricities. His mind has been altered by repeated attempts to control memory, and that control has become another form of captivity. He has removed knowledge in order to remain comfortable, then removed the discomfort caused by noticing that knowledge was missing. He has used the machine upon himself, because the Society of the Blind Eye made self-erasure part of its ordinary practice. The Society's members erase supernatural encounters from witnesses, and they erase their own awareness whenever that work becomes difficult to bear. Such a system can remain orderly for years, provided that nobody asks the right question and nobody retains the complete sequence of events. The Hall of the Forgotten therefore resembles a library whose books have been removed from the minds of their readers. Its shelves are numbered, its tubes are labeled, and its custodians possess routines that make the impossible seem administrative. The archive feels reassuringly structured, while the mind that produced it grows less orderly with every missing connection. McGucket's handwriting shifts across the labels, from confident notes to cramped marks that barely fit the paper. His memory gun has preserved the evidence of his decline, even as it helped produce the conditions of that decline. Within the recovered material, the children find not only what McGucket forgot, but the shape of the forgetting itself. The machine's dial allowed particular memories to be selected, yet the consequences extended into memories that were never directly touched. A removed conversation could alter the meaning of a room, while a removed warning could transform caution into foolishness. A lost face could leave a relationship without its beginning, and a missing accident could make later grief seem unreasonable. The device works with a narrow beam, but the spaces it creates spread outward through the whole mind. The archive's order cannot restore every connection, although it can offer enough evidence for someone to approach the truth. McGucket does not regain a complete past in a single moment, because the tubes provide fragments rather than a continuous life. He moves towards understanding through recognition, discomfort, and the gradual return of names that once belonged beside him. Stanford is among those names, and the portal is among those places, both recovered from the quiet custody of the archive. The workbench appears again from a different angle, showing tools that had been hidden behind the first memory. A second view reveals McGucket and Stanford standing close together, their attention fixed upon the portal's central frame. The scene contains no simple answer, only the patient evidence that the two men shared a project of extraordinary ambition. Other recovered material connects the memory gun to characters and major events elsewhere in Gravity Falls. The device is not an isolated invention buried beneath one mansion, because it belongs to the wider machinery of the town's secrets. Its presence reaches into encounters, investigations, disappearances, and attempts to control what ordinary people are permitted to remember. The children recognize the apparatus as an instrument of concealment, but also as a record of concealment. Each tube proves that something happened before somebody decided it should be forgotten. Once a memory has entered the archive, removing it leaves behind an object that can outlast its owner. This is the uncomfortable strength of the Hall of the Forgotten, where absence becomes evidence through the simple fact of storage. You may lose a memory, but the memory gun can leave its pale remainder behind. You may lose the name of a companion, while the label bearing that name remains tied around cool glass. You may forget the reason for fear, while the recovered image continues to display the face that caused it. You may no longer remember building a portal, while the tubes preserve the hands that worked beside Stanford. The machinery therefore creates a contradiction at the center of McGucket's story. He has made forgetting more powerful, but he has also made it observable. His device can remove selected memories, yet its tubes preserve the possibility that those memories will one day return. The cave remains dim around you, with the old machine standing quietly beneath the dripping stone. Blue-white electricity gathers along the wires, then fades through the coils in a rhythm too slow to seem urgent. The metal casing is cool except where the reels have warmed it, and a slight vibration travels through the floor. Glass tubes catch reflections from the machine so that each vessel appears to contain a narrow vertical flame. Paper labels brush against one another when the underground air shifts, making a dry sound beneath the steady water. The selector dial shows several positions, each marked by a symbol whose meaning has been lost or carefully withheld. A pair of pliers rests upon the workbench, its handles stained with dark grease and fine stone dust. Reels turn behind a small inspection window, carrying light through the casing in a repeated sequence of quiet rotations. The cave's moisture gathers along the shelf edges and gives the darkness a polished, almost tender appearance. Every surface holds traces of use, from scratches around the dial to fingerprints faintly clouded upon the glass. The apparatus seems less like a weapon in this light than a complicated household instrument built for private sorrow. Yet the beam remains capable of entering a living mind, and the tubes remain capable of holding what that mind can no longer bear. McGucket approaches the recovered memories slowly, because recognition can hurt more than ignorance when the missing past begins to return. He sees himself beside Stanford, and the image carries the weight of a friendship divided by forgetting. He sees the portal project, and the machinery answers a question his later life could never properly form. He sees the workbench, the calculations, the wiring, and the confidence of a man who still believed his mind belonged entirely to him. Then the recovered material shows the memory gun, first as an experiment, then as a solution, and finally as a habit. The sequence is not perfectly clear, since some moments have been removed and others altered by repeated viewing. Even so, the direction of his life becomes visible. Knowledge creates fear, fear invites removal, removal produces confusion, and confusion sends him back to the machine. The memory gun offers a temporary clearing inside the mind, but each clearing leaves the surrounding landscape harder to recognize. His mental deterioration appears alongside the experiments, not as a simple punishment, but as a gradual loss of continuity. The more often McGucket uses the device, the more difficult it becomes to tell which memories remain reliable. The archive preserves his former capabilities, relationships, and discoveries, while the man himself becomes separated from their meaning. When the children assemble the tubes, they are also assembling the outline of a person who cannot assemble himself. They place one recovered scene beside another and find that the gaps between them contain their own quiet information. A missing beginning suggests intervention, a repeated name suggests importance, and a faded label suggests that someone once tried to hide the trail. The children do not need every answer before understanding that McGucket's life has been arranged against him. His past has become a series of rooms with doors removed, while the archive keeps the keys in numbered rows. The Hall of the Forgotten stores memories as though they were records in a civic collection, each separated from the person who lived it. That separation makes the archive feel safe, but safety here is only another word for distance. The memory gun allows the Society of the Blind Eye to maintain a town where supernatural events can be witnessed and then denied. People walk away from impossible encounters with ordinary expressions, carrying an emptiness they cannot explain. Society's members repeat the process upon themselves, ensuring that even the guardians of the secret remain uncertain about what they protect. Such forgetting becomes communal, almost architectural, built into the tunnels, labels, routines, and habits of the society. McGucket's experiments reveal the cost of treating memory as material that can be trimmed without consequence. The past is not a collection of separate objects, however neatly the tubes can be arranged upon a shelf. It is a network of associations, and when one strand is removed, the surrounding strands tighten, loosen, or break. The machine can select a particular memory through its dial, but it cannot select only that memory's consequences. A beam can leave the subject's face, and a tube can receive the result, but neither device can repair the empty space. The recovered memories permit McGucket to approach the truth about his former life, though approach is not the same as complete restoration. He begins to see that the portal, Stanford, the memory gun, and his later confusion belong to one continuous history. That history had been divided into removable sections, each protected by glass and a label. The truth waits among those sections, quiet and patient, like a room whose furniture has remained covered beneath cloth. Once McGucket recognizes the workbench, the portal no longer seems like a stranger's invention. Once he recognizes Stanford, the repeated name no longer feels like a meaningless sound. Once he recognizes the memory gun, the gaps in his mind acquire a mechanism and a maker. The device becomes an explanation for his uncertainty, but it also reminds him that explanation cannot restore everything it describes. Near the rear of the cave, dripping water falls into a channel worn smooth by many years. Its sound joins the muted turning of the reels, creating a rhythm that seems to measure the distance between stored memories. Copper coils rest in their frame, warm enough to soften the chill gathered in the surrounding stone. The blue-white glow reaches only a short distance, leaving the higher walls in darkness, filled with faint reflections. Cool glass remains smooth beneath your fingers, while the paper labels offer a rough contrast at every tube's neck. The selector dial catches a small glint whenever the machinery pulses, then returns to its patient, unreadable stillness. Inside the casing, reels turn around their axles, maintaining the old sequence, although no one has requested another memory. A thin wire curves across the workbench like a drawn line, connecting the instrument to a battery hidden beneath the boards. Water moves through the cave in tiny, unseen streams, carrying minerals from the walls and leaving pale traces behind. The shelves cast narrow shadows across the floor, and each shadow ends where the electrical glow begins. Nothing changes quickly here, yet every sound suggests that time is still passing through the archive. The children's work is quiet and methodical, requiring them to compare images, names, dates, and places without disturbing the fragile order. They view the stored material again, because a second viewing may reveal a hand at the edge of a frame or a symbol beneath dust. The recovered memory of McGucket working with Stanford becomes clearer beside the images of the portal project. The two men are not merely present in the same room. Their movements show familiarity, shared purpose, and long practice. The project requires machinery that reaches beyond the ordinary world, and McGucket's later life shows what happened when that work became connected with fear. A frightened face appears in another tube, perhaps belonging to a witness who saw what the portal revealed. The image remains brief, but its terror gives the surrounding experiments a human scale. A road accident follows, suggesting that the supernatural does not remain safely inside laboratories or caves. Events move outward into roads, homes, forests, and the minds of people never prepared to become part of a secret. The memory gun then offers the society a way to make those events disappear from surviving witnesses. The method is efficient, and efficiency allows the practice to become ordinary. Soon the Society of the Blind Eye can regard memory removal as routine maintenance, something required to keep the town undisturbed. The archive grows because the town continues to encounter what it cannot explain. The town forgets because the society continues to collect what it cannot permit people to retain. Beneath the surface, the tubes accumulate in the Hall of the Forgotten, where memory becomes an inventory of hidden disturbances. The children's discoveries reveal that the archive has been built from many lives, not only McGucket's damaged recollections. Yet McGucket's story gives the collection its deepest sadness, because the inventor has become one of the people least able to read his own records. The memory gun was created by McGucket, but it eventually stands apart from him, surrounded by labels describing the person he used to be. Its craft remains exact, even when its maker's thoughts no longer follow a dependable pattern. The dial still selects, the beam still travels, the tubes still receive, and the reels still turn inside their metal casing. Only the meaning of the process becomes unstable. A machine may perform the same action each time, while the human reason for beginning that action changes beyond recognition. For McGucket, forgetting begins as a deliberate act and ends as a landscape he inhabits without a map. The children can trace the road because the archive preserves markers, but McGucket must walk it while discovering that he once built it. His recovered memories do not return as comfort, since each one carries knowledge of what was lost around it. They return as evidence, and evidence can be both merciful and severe. The workbench proves that he was once capable, the portal that he once understood, and Stanford that he once belonged to another life. The memory gun proves that these truths were removed rather than naturally forgotten. The repeated names and the repeated image of the portal gather together beneath the old mansion. Their connection is not complete, but it is strong enough to draw the children onward. The Hall of the Forgotten remains organized, numbered, and still, while the mind behind its most important collection grows increasingly difficult to reach. Perhaps that is the deepest unease within the archive. An ordered place can preserve disorder, and a labeled tube can outlive the person whose memory it contains. The shelves do not need to understand what they hold. The paper does not need to forgive the hand that wrote upon it. The glass does not need to know whose fear has been suspended within its cool transparency. A memory may be separated from its owner, but separation does not make it harmless or complete. The archive can wait through years of darkness, through the rise and fall of ordinary lives, and through the return of children who ask careful questions. It can preserve what a person can no longer carry, even when carrying the truth would have been painful. McGucket's mind has been relieved of pieces of his history, yet that history remains in the cave, sheltered by stone and machinery. The memory gun's blue-white beam once made absence appear clean. The tubes reveal that absence has edges, labels, dates, and a place upon a shelf. The portal project remains among the recovered material, connected to Stanford and to the buried sequence that shaped McGucket's life. The Society of the Blind Eye remains connected to the gun because it turned personal forgetting into public concealment. The device's meaning extends beyond the inventor's original workbench, touching other characters and events across Gravity Falls. The town is filled with secrets, but the memory gun changes secrecy by giving hidden knowledge a physical container. The unknown can be stored in glass, marked with ink, and replayed beneath the quiet attention of those who find it. The cave's steady dripping water continues as the children place the tubes back into their rows. Warm copper coils fade towards darkness, retaining only a dull trace of heat beneath the dust. A final blue-white shimmer moves through the glass and disappears, leaving the labels pale against the black shelves. The selector dial rests between two markings, neither pointing clearly towards forgetting nor remembrance. Cool glass slips gently into its niche, and the paper tied around it settles against the neighboring label. Reels turn once more inside the metal casing, completing a sequence that began long before the children entered the chamber. Water touches the stone channel and travels beyond sight, carrying away the small sounds of the underground rooms. The machine remains ready, its wires coiled, its beam silent, its purpose waiting inside the arranged parts. Around you, the archive holds its careful order, while the cave gathers darkness over every tube and every name. McGucket can approach the truth because the memory gun preserved fragments of the life it helped him lose. The children can approach that truth because the Hall of the Forgotten kept those fragments where hands could find them. Forgetting in Gravity Falls is therefore not only a weakness of the mind, but an engineered process with instruments, custodians, and records. Memory becomes something that can be stored, named, replayed, and examined long after its owner has lost the strength to explain it. The archive offers no promise that a damaged life can be restored exactly as it was. It offers only the possibility that scattered rooms may be entered again, one quiet threshold after another. Within those rooms, McGucket's work with Stanford remains beside the portal, the frightened face beside the road accident, and the memory gun beside them all. The shelves continue into darkness, carrying countless private absences beneath the ordinary town. Above the cave, visitors will walk through the museum, guides will repeat familiar dates, and the world will appear safely arranged. Below them, the tubes will wait with their labeled fragments, preserving what the mind could not keep. An organized archive may protect the past, but it may also reveal how much a person has been forced to abandon. McGucket's former life survives in the darkness, not as a single story, but as rooms connected by missing doors. The reels continue their slow turning, and somewhere beyond the shelves, water falls into stone. What a person can no longer carry remains here, held in glass, surrounded by copper, and guarded by the patient silence of the cave. You descend beneath the ordinary streets of Gravity Falls, where the town's familiar noises fade beneath layers of timber, earth, and stone. A narrow stairway carries you into a chamber lit by candles, while hooded figures move quietly between shelves filled with glass tubes. Each vessel contains a memory removed from someone who once lived above. The room smells of wax and old paper, and muted voices pass behind cloth masks. A wooden table, polished by many hands, occupies the center of the chamber. Upon it rest copper instruments, folded papers, and small cards bearing names, dates, and careful descriptions. The work appears orderly, almost domestic, like a service arranged for the comfort of neighbors. Yet every tube represents an absence, and every absence belongs to someone who has returned home carrying less of their own life. You are standing beneath the town while the society performs its quiet labor around you. Hooded figures cross the candlelit room with measured steps, their robes brushing against the stone floor. Wax has gathered in pale ridges around the holders, and old paper lends the air a dry, faintly sweet scent. Behind their cloth masks, the members speak in low voices that never quite become conversation. Their words seem softened before reaching you, as though the fabric itself has been taught to conceal them. Rainwater moves through a nearby basement grate, carrying the smell of night into the chamber. Far overhead, a town bell sounds once, distant and softened by the ground. The wooden table bears small scratches beneath its polish, marks left by years of hands, instruments, and decisions made quietly in the dark. McGucket founded the Blind Eye Society as fear gathered around Gravity Falls' stranger incidents. He understood that frightened people often wanted one thing more urgently than explanation: rest. A witness who had seen something impossible might be unable to sleep, work, or speak comfortably with neighbors. The organization was created to help people forget painful or frightening experiences, offering relief where ordinary sympathy seemed insufficient. At first, its purpose contained a measure of compassion. The society promised that a terrible moment could be separated from the remainder of a person's life. Memory was treated like a wound that might be cleaned away. In this early arrangement, McGucket and his companions imagined themselves as caretakers of troubled minds. They did not yet appear to govern the town's knowledge, although their first instruments already placed that power in their hands. The chamber around you holds the quiet of an old workshop after its workers have gone. A candle flame bends whenever night air enters through the grate, making the shadows of the hooded figures lengthen across the walls. Copper coils catch the light in thin, uncertain lines, while the glass tubes remain mostly dark. The smell of warm wax lies over the sharper odor of metal and dust. Beneath your feet, the floor carries a soft vibration from water descending somewhere beyond the archive. A chair stands beside the polished table, its seat worn smooth by repeated use. No one raises a voice, and no instrument makes more than a restrained click. The room has been arranged to suggest safety, yet its stillness feels deliberate, as if every sound must remain within its appointed place. The service gradually expanded beyond private grief and individual terror. Memories involving gravity falls, supernatural phenomena began to enter the society's care because they were considered dangerous to ordinary life. A person who had encountered a monster, a portal, or an impossible machine could be relieved of the burden. The members presented forgetting as protection, and their language remained calm while their reach grew wider. They believed that unremembered events could not trouble ordinary life, because no witness would carry the disturbance into a home, workplace, or public conversation. Each treatment, therefore, removed not only fear, but also the possibility of shared knowledge. What began as assistance for frightened witnesses became a method for controlling what the community was allowed to know. The town's peace was being purchased with pieces of its own memory. You pass between shelves where hundreds of tubes rest in wooden cradles, each catching a small portion of candlelight. Some contain pale coils of brightness, while others hold colors too faint to identify. A hooded member bends over a ledger, turning a page with two careful fingers. Nearby, another figure wipes dust from a brass fitting with a square of gray cloth. The fabric masks make every face seem distant, and the muted voices resemble people speaking beside a sick. Old paper has curled at the edges in the damp, while wax has hardened beneath the candlesticks in overlapping layers. Through the grate, night air moves across the basement, cool against your face and carrying wet soil from the streets above. The town bell returns as a barely audible tremor within the stone. The members speak of extraction, preservation, and protection, choosing words that make the procedure sound clean. Their calm language does not change the violence of altering another person's mind. A memory is not merely an object inside the body, waiting to be lifted away without consequence. It may contain fear, but it also contains context, warning, responsibility, and knowledge of what one has survived. When the society removes it, the person loses more than distress. The treatment can sever an event from the meaning later drawn from it. A frightened resident may leave with a lighter heart, yet that lightness conceals a theft. The member's composure becomes part of the moral problem because polished manners allow profound intrusion to resemble routine assistance. The society's gentleness of tone cannot make its power harmless. A thin draft travels along the floor, disturbing loose scraps of paper beneath the table. The candles burn with small blue edges near their wicks, and the wax pools shine like dull amber in the low light. Around you, hooded figures move between shelves, carrying ledgers close against their robes. Their footsteps are soft, but not silent, making a slow pattern over the stone. Behind the masks, voices murmur names that soon disappear beneath the deeper sounds of the underground passage. The tabletop reflects the candles in broken shapes, its polish dulled where countless palms have rested. The archive smells of paper kept too long in darkness, wax warmed and cooled, and mineral damp rising from the cave. Somewhere above, a cart passes over the street, and the bell gives another distant note. The society's practice turns secrecy into a civic habit. Residents who receive the treatment often leave feeling relieved, but incomplete, unable to name what has vanished from them. A corner of life may feel strangely vacant, though no image rises to explain the absence. Since the town does not remember the same incidents together, its people cannot compare their experiences. One person's missing night cannot be placed beside another's missing afternoon. The absence remains private, and private absences are easily mistaken for ordinary forgetfulness. In this way, the society prevents townspeople from recognizing a pattern in their losses. It does not need to silence every witness by force, because it has taught each witness to doubt what cannot be recalled. Gravity falls can continue appearing normal while supernatural incidents pass through its history like hidden weather. The underground air has grown colder near the archive's oldest wall. Moisture gathers in the seams between the stones, shining whenever a candle flame leans towards it. A narrow stream falls somewhere beyond the shelves, making a patient sound that never varies. The hooded members remain composed, their movements careful beneath the folds of their garments. Cloth masks soften their breathing into a collective hush. On the wooden table, a ledger lies open beside a row of empty copper rings. The paper smells faintly of dust and iron, while the candles leave a warmer trace of wax along the room's edges. From the grate, night air enters in narrow intervals, bringing the damp scent of the town's streets. The bell overhead sounds twice, its notes separated by darkness and stone. The society keeps the removed memories rather than allowing their owners to retain them. This changes the archive from a place of temporary care into a reservoir of stolen evidence. Blind Ivan and the other members guard the collection from outsiders, protecting the tubes with a seriousness usually reserved for public records or sacred objects. Their duty is not simply to preserve the past, but to prevent it from returning to those who lived it. The erased memories remain available as evidence, waiting in glass for anyone who can reach them. Each tube can establish that an event occurred, even when the person involved has been made unable to testify. The archive becomes a moral ledger. Every entry records both relief and theft, both the easing of fear and the removal of knowledge. Secrecy is sustained by keeping proof close while keeping its owners empty. You stand near the guarded shelves as Blind Ivan turns his covered face towards the passage. His posture is patient, but his hands remain folded over the key ring at his belt. Other members watch from the candlelit room, their robes forming dark shapes against the pale stone. Glass rests in rows before you, some tubes clouded with silver light, others filled with a faint green shimmer. The archive carries wax, old paper, damp wood, and the cool scent of water running below. A polished section of the table reflects Blind Ivan's sleeve as he moves past. Behind the cloth masks, several voices exchange quiet instructions. Night air slips through the grate and touches the edge of your clothing. Far above, the town bell marks another hour that the people of Gravity Falls will not connect with anything below. Blind Ivan's guardianship reveals how thoroughly the society has changed its understanding of service. The members no longer regard memory as belonging entirely to the person who endured it. They treat dangerous knowledge as a communal hazard, something to be collected, stored, and withheld for the supposed protection of everyone else. In their view, the archive is safer than the public mind. Yet the owners of those memories were not asked to become strangers to their own histories. The society's original purpose was partly compassionate, but its later form is morally compromised. Kindness has become permission, and permission has become authority. The same hand that once offered comfort now decides which truths a resident may carry. The members remain serene because they believe the result justifies the method, even when the method leaves a person unable to understand an important part of life. The room narrows around you as the shelves rise towards the ceiling. Candlelight reaches only the nearest tubes, leaving the upper rows suspended in brownish darkness. A hooded figure climbs a short ladder, and the wood gives a mild creak beneath one careful foot. The table below has been worn smooth where sleeves and elbows have passed over it for years. Paper labels lift slightly in the damp air, their corners trembling whenever the grate admits a colder breath. Muted voices gather behind the masks, then separate into indistinct murmurs. Wax has spilled across one corner of the table and hardened around a metal clasp. Somewhere under the floor, water drops into a hollow basin, creating a soft interval of sound. The bell overhead is almost lost, reduced to a gentle vibration within your ribs. McGucket returns to the center of this history because his repeated treatments reveal the danger within the cure. He does not merely offer forgetfulness to others, he submits himself to it again and again. Each treatment makes his life easier to bear for a while, but also removes another portion of the person he once was. Forgetting can become addictive when memory brings pain that seems impossible to hold. Relief arrives quickly, while the cost remains hidden until missing pieces begin to surround the mind. His attempt to offer forgetfulness has made forgetting his own life possible. He becomes evidence that the society's method does not remain under perfect control, even in the hands of its founder. The treatment designed to protect people from unbearable knowledge can eventually protect them from knowledge of themselves. A candle gutters beside the ledger, and its smoke curls beneath the low ceiling before thinning into darkness. You hear the cloth masks shift whenever the members breathe or turn their heads. One hooded figure presses both hands against the wooden table, feeling its familiar surface before reaching for a tube. The glass is cold, and a small ring of moisture forms where it meets the wood. The scent of old paper is strongest near the ledger, while wax softens the air around the flame. From the grate comes a thin current carrying rain, leaves, and the distant odor of chimney smoke. The underground stream continues its slow descent beyond the wall. A town bell drifts down through the earth, passing over the archive without recognizing it. McGucket's repeated surrender also complicates the question of consent. A person may ask to be freed from terror, yet terror can be part of the evidence needed to prevent the same harm from returning. Once the memory has been removed, the decision cannot easily be reconsidered because the person no longer remembers why it seemed necessary. The society keeps the knowledge in its archive, but the individual loses the power to evaluate the bargain. The central ethical conflict is therefore not simply whether fear should be reduced. It is whether relief from fear is worth losing knowledge of what happened. The members answer by pointing to calm homes and ordinary streets. McGucket's condition answers differently, showing that repeated comfort may hollow out the life it was meant to preserve. The archive holds this question without resolving it. You move beside a row of tubes marked with dates from different years, each label written in a patient, familiar hand. Some refer to a single frightened witness, while others seem to belong to incidents remembered by several residents before the society intervened. The glass gives back the candlelight in small, trembling points. Hooded figures pass between the shelves, their robes making a soft friction against one another. A cloth mask turns towards you, then away, as if the member has noticed only the movement of air. The wooden table carries the dull warmth of recent hands. Around it, wax and paper mingle with the scent of damp stone. Night enters through the grate and lowers the temperature near the floor. Above, ordinary footsteps continue in streets that know nothing of the tubes beneath them. If residents could compare their experiences, the town's apparent normality would begin to fracture. A missing memory might correspond to an unexplained mark, while a blank evening might align with another person's sudden relief. Shared recollection could reveal that the supernatural was not occasional, but repeated and carefully concealed. The society prevents this comparison by keeping each person's loss separate. Silence becomes self-reinforcing because no one can confidently describe what has been removed. The absence of testimony is mistaken for the absence of events. Gravity Falls appears ordinary because its history has been edited before becoming public knowledge. The society therefore performs a civic function, though one its members do not openly name. It maintains the town's normal appearance by ensuring that the people above cannot assemble the evidence stored below. A draft passes through the grate and makes the candle flames bow in the same direction. For a moment, the shelves seem to lean with them, and the tubes glimmer as though small lights were turning inside the glass. You smell wet earth, cold metal, and the faint sweetness of wax. The paper labels whisper against the wood as their edges lift and settle. Blind Ivan's footsteps approach along the passage, unhurried and even. His key ring gives a restrained sound beneath the heavier hush of the chamber. The hooded members remain close to the shelves, their faces hidden behind pale cloth. At the center, the wooden table holds its polished shine beneath a skin of dust. The stream beyond the wall continues to fall, and a bell from above reaches you as a dim pulse rather than a clear note. The society's calm language is troubling because it allows moral responsibility to disappear into procedure. A member can speak of removing a burden while avoiding the fact that another person's judgment is being altered. Protection can conceal control, and safety can conceal the destruction of shared history. Even so, the members are not simple villains who enjoy suffering. Many believe they are preventing panic, preserving families, and allowing frightened neighbors to return to ordinary routines. Their compromise lies in accepting that these benefits permit them to decide for others. Compassion begins the practice, but secrecy gives it permanence. Once a town has been protected from too much knowledge, the protectors acquire an interest in maintaining ignorance. Every new supernatural event then becomes another reason to continue the work that created the silence. You reach the deeper shelves, where candlelight is weaker and the air carries more moisture. A line of tubes rests behind a copper grill, each vessel secured with a small clasp. The labels are crowded together, suggesting years of collecting and careful rearrangement. One hooded member lifts a cloth and wipes the grill clean, leaving a dark streak on the fabric. The old paper beneath your hand feels rough and cool, its fibers raised by dampness. The wooden table is far behind now, though its polished surface still catches a distant flame. Voices murmur in another chamber, hidden by stone and masks. Night air moves through the grate in a thin stream smelling of rain on pavement. Somewhere overhead, the bell begins another measured sequence, and the town continues to mark time without knowing what has been removed from it. McGucket's history makes the archive more intimate than a collection of anonymous records. He founded the society to help others forget frightening experiences, yet his own mind became increasingly dependent upon the same escape. The founder can no longer stand outside the method as a neutral guardian. His repeated treatments show that forgetting may become a habit before anyone recognizes it as a danger. Each erasure offers temporary quiet, and that quiet encourages another erasure when old pain returns. Eventually, the person seeking protection may lose the memories that explain the need for protection at all. McGucket's missing life is therefore not an accidental side effect. It is the clearest demonstration of the society's central flaw, because the cure can consume the patient, the witness, and finally the keeper of the cure. The deepest chamber is almost dark, and the candles appear as separate islands of amber around you. Hooded figures move between those islands, their outlines appearing and vanishing behind the shelves. Their masks turn breathing into a soft, collective rustle. The archive smells of old paper soaked by underground damp, with wax lingering near every flame. A wooden surface somewhere behind you gives a quiet tap as a tube is placed upon it. Water descends through stone in a steady, distant rhythm. Cold air enters through a narrow opening and travels along the floor before fading beneath the shelves. The town bell overhead is now so faint that you sense it more than hear it. Above the chamber, roofs, windows, shops, and streets remain arranged in their ordinary places. The tubes preserve what residents can no longer reach, making them both records and accusations. Each vessel contains relief for someone who feared an event, but also proof that the event occurred. The archive's value as evidence does not cancel the kindness that may have accompanied the removal. Nor does that kindness excuse the society's refusal to return what it has taken. A person may have needed rest, but the right to know one's own history has not vanished with fear. The moral ledger remains balanced between two injuries, one caused by remembering and another caused by forgetting. Blind Ivan and the other members protect the archive because they understand its power, even while describing that protection as public service. The glass keeps the past available while the town above remains unable to ask for it. You listen beside the shelves as the underground sounds gather into a single quiet atmosphere. A candle gives a small crack, and a thin line of smoke rises towards the low ceiling. Paper shifts in the draft, and the labels tremble against their wooden supports. The hooded figures continue their slow movements, carrying tubes with both hands. Their robes brush the floor, while the cloth masks soften every word into a distant murmur. The smell of wax lies close to your skin, and old paper adds a dry note beneath it. Night air enters from the grate, cool and damp, before moving onward through the archive. A bell from the town above marks the passing hour. Nothing in its measured sound suggests that an entire history is resting beneath the streets. The society's existence explains how gravity falls can appear normal despite repeated supernatural incidents. Strange events do not need to be denied in public if the people who witness them have been relieved of their memories. A town may continue opening shops, crossing bridges, and discussing the weather while its buried history grows more crowded. The members' work creates an ordinary surface over an extraordinary foundation. Yet normality achieved through erasure is not peace achieved through understanding. The danger has not disappeared, and the knowledge needed to recognize it has not disappeared from the archive. It has merely been removed from those who might have acted upon it. Beneath the civic calm, the society preserves a record of every occasion when fear was judged too costly for the truth to remain. The air above you seems to belong to another world, though the same rain is falling through the streets. Through the basement grate, you hear a cart wheel pass, followed by the faint closing of a door. The sound is ordinary, almost reassuring, and contrasts with the shelves of captured memories below. Candlelight rests on the copper fittings, while shadows gather behind the guardians' masks. The wooden table has become a dark shape at the center of the chamber, reflecting only fragments of flame. Old paper lends a faint dryness to the damp air. Water falls somewhere in the cave, each drop separated by a long interval. The bell overhead sounds once more, its vibration traveling through the ceiling like a slow current. The society cannot finally answer whether forgetting is mercy or surrender. Its members have evidence that fear can ruin ordinary life, and also that knowledge can protect people from repeating hidden disasters. McGucket's condition supplies another kind of evidence, showing that escape from memory may become a prison built from missing rooms. Residents who leave relieved but incomplete carry the cost without understanding its source. Those who remain ignorant cannot consent to the arrangement again because the first decision has been erased. Blind Ivan guards the archive, but no locked door can settle the question held inside it. The removed memories remain available, and their continued existence means that truth has not been destroyed. It waits beneath gravity falls, surrounded by copper, glass, and the patient silence of the cave. You stand once more near the passage leading upwards, where the night air is slightly warmer and the sounds of the town become clearer. Behind you, hooded figures return the tubes to their places and close the ledgers. The polished wooden table remains beneath the candles, marked by years of careful hands. Cloth masks move through the dimness, carrying muted voices towards the deeper rooms. Wax cools beside the instruments, and old paper settles into its shelves. The basement grate allows one final breath of rain-soaked air to cross your face. Above, a bell rings over the roofs of Gravity Falls, steady and unconcerned. The streets continue their business, unaware of the history beneath their feet. Shop doors close, windows darken, and ordinary life proceeds over a hidden archive filled with everything the town has been made to forget. The deeper rooms open into a chamber where the Society of the Blind Eye has gathered around its instrument. The air carries the dry scent of dust, wax, and heated metal. You stand near the stone wall with Dipper, Mabel, Suze, and Wendy, while the society members form a pale circle beneath the hanging lamps. Blind Ivan raises the memory gun with both hands, his sightless eyes turned towards the movement before him. The device gives a sudden electrical crackle, and a thin blue beam trembles across the chamber. Dipper pulls Mabel behind him, Wendy shifts her weight beside a wooden chair, and Suze reaches for a length of rope lying among the abandoned equipment. McGucket watches from the edge of the room, his beard resting against the front of his coat. For one slow moment, the gun points towards Dipper, Mabel, Suze, and Wendy. Then Blind Ivan fires. The beam crosses the darkness like a thread of frozen lightning, casting every stone and instrument into sharp, colorless relief. Its light touches the floor before reaching the people gathered there, and small reflections tremble along the machine's brass fittings. Around you, shadows move without haste, sliding over the walls as though the chamber itself has become uncertain of its shape. Footsteps approach from several directions, soft at first, and then more distinct beneath the crackling hum. A loose chain sways above an empty table, tapping once against a hook. The scent of old paper has grown warmer near the device, mingling with mineral damp that has entered through the basement foundations. Rope tightens around wooden chairs as Suze drags them aside, and the fibers give a faint, dry creak. Beyond the barred windows, night remains pressed against the glass, while the museum waits in silence above. McGucket steps forward before the beam can reach the others, placing himself between Blind Ivan and the four younger figures. The light strikes his chest, spreads over his coat, and gathers around his face in a cold blue haze. You see his hands rise slightly, not in surrender, but with the weary patience of someone accepting an old inconvenience. Blind Ivan keeps the memory gun trained on him, and the machine produces another sudden electrical crackle. Nothing changes. McGucket remains standing. His beard shivers in the current, his spectacles flash once, and the beam sinks into him without carrying away the result the society expects. Blind Ivan fires again, and the chamber fills with the device's pale radiance. Again, McGucket does not fall, forget, or become empty. The memory gun clicks as its charge fades, leaving a faint smell of rain on hot stone. Blind Ivan turns the weapon in his grip, searching for an adjustment. The first beam has left the room strangely bright, though the lamps have not altered their strength. Dust hangs in the air like a slow snowfall, and every particle catches the fading blue glow before returning to darkness. A narrow line of light passes over the wrinkles in McGucket's face, revealing the uneven texture of his skin and the white threads woven through his beard. Cold air moves across your face from a crack beneath the eastern wall. Somewhere behind the machine, water drops into a shallow metal tray at irregular intervals. The sound is quiet enough to be mistaken for a clock, yet each drop seems to mark the failed attempt. Ink smudged beneath a fingertip darkens the edge of a nearby ledger, and the black mark resembles a small, unfinished map. The soft clink of a memory tube comes from a shelf disturbed by the movement, followed by a gentle rolling sound. Blind Ivan fires a third time, then a fourth, and the memory gun answers with a strained mechanical whine. The society members stare at McGucket, their faces arranged in the solemn expressions of people witnessing a sacred procedure. Yet the intended result refuses to appear. McGucket gives a slow cough, lifts one finger towards the machine, and explains that his mind has already been gone for decades. The words settle heavily among the shelves. Through the calm absurdity of his voice, he tells you that the device has spent years removing pieces of him, until scarcely a clean memory remains for the beam to take. His long exposure has made him resistant to the society's attempt, not because he is untouched, but because the damage has already been carried out. Blind Ivan fires again, and the beam flickers against McGucket, like a candle trying to illuminate a burned house. The room becomes briefly comic, in the manner of a dream that has wandered too near something tragic. Blind Ivan shakes the memory gun, taps its side, and angles his head, as though the machine might answer a polite question. One member checks a dial with a gloved thumb, while another peers at a brass gauge that has begun to tremble. The device emits a weak puff of smoke, and a small spring flies loose across the floor. It strikes a stone step and continues to bounce long after everyone has stopped moving. Suze watches it pass, then bends to collect it while still holding the rope. Mabel's eyes remain fixed on the tattoo beneath Blind Ivan's sleeve, where the Society of the Blind Eye has marked its allegiance. Dipper keeps his attention on the gun. Wendy shifts behind a chair, prepared to move. McGucket stands in the center of the blue light, and the joke remains shadowed by the truth that the machine has helped create him. The Society members advance together, abandoning the hesitation caused by the failed memory gun. You hear their footsteps drawing nearer across the stone, measured and overlapping, until the chamber seems filled with the rhythm of approaching boots. Dipper pushes a table sideways, forcing two members to stumble against its carved legs. Mabel swings a coil of rope around another figure, and Suze pulls hard enough to tighten it around wooden chairs and ankles at once. Wendy steps between the lamps and the nearest attacker, using the darkness to redirect him towards the wall. Dipper catches a second member by the shoulder and guides him down beside a crate of glass tubes. Mabel moves with quick, cheerful determination, tying knots around wrists while speaking in a tone that makes the situation feel almost domestic. Suze braces his feet against the floor and holds two prisoners together. Wendy gathers the dropped instruments away from their hands. The beams of the lamps stretch across the floor, broken by chair legs, rope, and the long shadows of people struggling around you. A sleeve brushes against your arm, bringing the smell of wool and old varnish. Wooden furniture shifts across the stone with a deep dragging murmur. From the machine, a current continues to crackle unevenly, brightening and dimming in small pulses. The darkness beneath the tables holds scraps of paper, bent spectacles, and one brass screw that glitters whenever the light returns. Dust settles on the shoulders of the restrained members, making their robes appear older than they had seemed moments before. Mabel's fingers move across a knot, testing its firmness, while the rope fibers press into the wood and leave pale marks. A memory tube rolls beneath a cabinet and stops beside a line of dried wax. Above the chamber, the museum's walls absorb every sound without giving anything back. Blind Ivan remains upright near the machine, gripping the memory gun, while Dipper, Mabel, Suze, and Wendy subdue the final members of the society. His tattoo is partly visible beneath the loosened sleeve, its black lines softened by years of movement and dust. Mabel guides him into a chair and draws the rope across his shoulders, while Suze fastens the knot behind the backrest. The wooden chair gives a long creak beneath his weight. Mabel leans close to the tattoo, uncaps a small ink pen, and begins drawing on the design while Blind Ivan sits in restrained confusion. She adds a tiny pair of spectacles, a crooked star, and a line that turns the solemn symbol into something almost harmless. Ink marks her fingers as she works. Dipper reaches for the memory gun, lifts it from Blind Ivan's grasp, and feels its weight settle into his palms. The machine hums beside him, waiting for a new instruction. The pen scratches lightly over skin, a sound nearly lost beneath the quiet machinery. Mabel's ink has a faint chemical smell, sharper than the wax and less pleasant than the dust. Blind Ivan's chair stands beside a row of wooden cabinets, each holding memory tubes in separate shallow slots. Glass touches glass when the shelves tremble, producing a delicate, uncertain chime. Suze's rope crosses the chair back in several thick loops, and the tightened strands cast narrow shadows over the floor. Wendy remains near the entrance, one hand resting against the stone as she listens for movement above. The lamps have begun to warm the air, but the corners of the chamber retain the damp cold of the earth. A small current leaps between two contacts on the machine, creating a sudden electrical crackle that illuminates Mabel's drawing for an instant. The brightness fades, leaving the tattoo changed beneath its new layer of ink. Dipper turns the memory gun towards the great machine and studies the dial set into its side. Around the rim, small labels mark individual people, places, and groups whose names have been stored for repeated use. The central pointer rests beneath a narrow glass cover, and the letters seem to shift whenever the blue current passes through them. You stand close enough to read the words as Dipper moves his thumb over the metal edge. He searches among the settings until the inscription Society of the Blind Eye appears beneath the pointer. For several seconds, he does not press the trigger. McGucket watches him from the beam's fading path, while fragments of expression seem to move beneath the confusion of his face. Dipper selects the Society of the Blind Eye on the machine's dial. The choice is quiet, almost administrative, and the chamber seems to understand its meaning before anyone speaks. A faint breeze enters through the museum windows above and travels down the old ventilation shafts, carrying the scent of wet leaves into the underground room. The lamps tremble in their brackets, and their glass chimneys make a thin ringing sound. Along the walls, framed diagrams lean at uneven angles, showing eyes, gears, and careful lines of human memory. Their paper has roughened with age, and the edges lift whenever the air moves. A memory tube shifts on the shelves, followed by the gentle settling of another against its neighbor. Outside, the town remains hidden beneath darkness, yet a faint gray begins to gather beyond the upper windows. Dawn reaches the museum windows, touching the dust on their panes and turning it from black to silver. The underground chamber remains dim, but morning has started to enter the building. Dipper presses the trigger, and the memory gun releases a beam wider than the earlier flashes. It passes over the society members one by one, touching their robes, hands, concealed instruments, and the symbols they have worn for years. The beam does not strike with violence. Instead, it moves through the room with a patient, searching brightness, as though following a catalogue kept inside the machine. Blind Ivan sits beneath its glow, the rope held firmly across his chest, and Mabel's inked additions dark upon his tattoo. The other members begin to sway. Some clutch their heads, while others stare at the cabinets and shelves without recognizing what they contain. Their knowledge of the Society of the Blind Eye loosens first, followed by the memories that have supported its authority. The reversal uses the Society's method against itself, turning its instrument towards the people who made forgetting into a system. The beam moves slowly across the stone, and the room becomes a landscape of blue shadows and quiet faces. Every glass tube catches a thin line of light, so that the shelves resemble rows of small frozen rivers. The smell of heated metal grows stronger near your hands. Rope tightening around wooden chairs gives a sequence of muted creaks as the restrained members shift in uncertainty. Their breathing rises and falls beneath the hum, sometimes fast, sometimes nearly absent. A bead of moisture forms on the cold wall and travels downward, leaving a dark trail through the dust. The lamps above remain pale and steady, while dawn alters the upper panes from charcoal to dull pearl. Footsteps on stone cease altogether. For a little while, movement comes only from the beam, the dust, and the slow turning of the machine's internal wheels. Blind Ivan's head lowers as the memory gun continues its work, and the room's secret authority begins to collapse without a single shattered object. Members who once commanded others now ask where they are. One forgets the name of the society, another forgets why the basement was built, and a third looks at the tattoo on his arm as though it belongs to a stranger. The machine stores no neat explanation for them. It removes the connected structure that allowed the organization to function. leaving scattered impressions where certainty had been. Dipper keeps both hands on the gun, watching the dial until the pointer settles. Mabel examines blind Ivan's altered tattoo and lets the pen rest against her palm. Suze checks every knot twice, because the ropes matter even when the memories do not. Wendy opens the heavy door and looks towards the stairs. The organization's immediate power is broken. The fading beam leaves afterimages along the walls, pale circles that disappear whenever you blink. The air cools as the machine's heat drains into its metal frame. A chair leg rubs against the floor, producing a low wooden whisper. Beneath the cabinets, the spring collected by Suze lies beside a loose button and a strip of blue cloth. Mabel's ink has dried unevenly, leaving one dark ridge over the tattoo and a faint smear across the back of her hand. The restrained members sit in silence, their robes slack, and their faces altered less by expression than by the absence of confidence. Near the entrance, Wendy's shadow stretches towards the stairwell where dawn is becoming clearer. Museum light enters through cracks in the ceiling like water through old boards. Nothing in the chamber is completely still, but every sound has become small. McGucket remains beside the machine while Dipper lowers the memory gun. The beam has not erased him, yet the reversal has reached into places the Society's repeated attempts could not entirely destroy. A word appears on his lips, then vanishes before it can become an answer. He remembers a corridor lined with plans, a hand holding a pencil, and the smell of hot machinery beneath a different roof. Another fragment gives him the outline of a tall man named Stanford Pines, though the face remains hidden behind light and distance. McGucket speaks Stanford's name as if it has been lying beneath his tongue for years. Dipper listens closely, and the name seems to connect the old inventor with the portal, the machine, and the history buried beneath Gravity Falls. His recovered memories arrive as fragments of identity rather than a single neat revelation. Around McGucket, the chamber appears to rearrange itself into pieces of a forgotten life. A brass instrument on the table reminds him of a workshop near the water. A torn diagram suggests a machine built with someone whose name he can almost recover. The scent of dust gives way briefly to oil, then to pine resin, then to the cold iron smell of an unfinished engine. Your fingertips rest against the stone wall, whose surface is ridged like dried river mud. A distant pipe ticks as it contracts. Glass tubes touch in their wooden slots, and the soft chime seems to accompany each returning detail. The old floor holds footprints in overlapping layers, some fresh and some softened by decades. Through the upper windows, dawn lays narrow silver bars across the cabinets. McGucket closes his eyes, and the fragments continue to gather. The memory gun has not restored every missing year, nor returned the past in the order that a written record might prefer. McGucket remembers Stanford Pines beside a portal, the weight of tools in his hands, and the terrible importance of the device they were building. He recalls fear, argument, and the moment when his own mind began to retreat beneath repeated erasure. The scattered pieces form a larger pattern without making the recovery perfectly complete. In the room below the museum, he looks at Dipper and speaks of old work, old promises, and a machine that should never have been trusted. The names return slowly. Gravity Falls remains at the center of the story, while the Society of the Blind Eye becomes a broken structure around them. The chamber now carries the quiet smell of wet stone after rain. Cold air moves through the open doorway and lifts the ends of loose rope. A faint thread of smoke escapes from the memory gun and curls beneath the lamps before dissolving. Mabel's tattoo drawing has softened at the edges, leaving the black lines beneath partly visible. On the floor, the collected spring catches the first grey brightness and gleams like a tiny crescent. The old diagrams on the walls seem less threatening without the Society standing before them. One page has fallen face down, its corner resting in a shallow puddle. Water has blurred several lines of ink, though the central drawing remains recognizable. Above, the first sounds of morning begin to enter the building. A cart crossing a street, a door closing, and distant footsteps passing over the museum floor. The Society of the Blind Eye had believed that an erased memory could become an erased responsibility. Its members had removed events from frightened minds, yet the consequences remained in buildings, machines, relationships, and habits that could not be made empty by a beam of light. The portal still existed. Stanford Pines had still disappeared into its history. McGucket had still been separated from the person he once was. Dipper, Mabel, Suze, and Wendy still stood among the evidence of what had happened, carrying knowledge that had survived the Society's method. Forgetting an event did not mean escaping its consequences. The erased past continued to shape the present through absence, fear, and the strange gaps that drew attention precisely because they were empty. By turning the machine upon the Society, Dipper had broken its immediate power, but he had not made its history harmless. Dawn spreads across the museum windows, while the basement remains in the last blue shade of night. Light reaches the panes gradually, first outlining their frames, and then revealing the dust gathered along the corners. The stone steps hold the damp coolness of the storm, and each footstep sends a small echo down into the deeper rooms. Rope rests against the chairs in pale coils, its fibers rough where they have been pulled tight. McGucket's coat carries the faint scent of smoke and rain, while the memory gun cools in Dipper's hands. Mabel's pen lies capped on a crate, its metal clip reflecting the new light. A memory tube sounds once from the shelf, followed by silence. Outside, gravity falls begins to separate itself from the night, roof by roof and window by window. The people of the Society are led from the chamber without their former certainty, and the museum receives them as quietly as it received their records. Dipper keeps the memory gun close, while Wendy checks the corridor ahead. Suze carries the loose rope over one shoulder, taking care that it does not drag across the stone. Mabel remains beside blind Ivan, whose tattoo now bears the small mark she has added to its solemn design. McGucket moves slowly, pausing whenever another fragment rises into reach. He remembers a name, a doorway, a blueprint, and a voice speaking about impossible machinery. The order is uncertain, but the connection is becoming stronger. The portal and Stanford Pines remain linked to him through those returning impressions. In the museum above, dawn light reaches the windows, and the old exhibits stand quietly beneath their glass. Gravity Falls appears ordinary in the morning, though its ordinary surfaces have never been the whole of the town. You stand beneath a pale sky while shopkeepers lift shutters, sweep yesterday's leaves from their thresholds, and carry boxes into the waking streets. The air smells of damp timber, cold iron, and the faint sweetness of pine. Footsteps pass over the pavement in different rhythms, none aware of the chamber below the museum. A bird settles on a roof line and shakes rain from its wings. Sunlight enters the upper windows one pane at a time, touching displays, ledgers, and dust-covered frames. Somewhere underground, glass tubes remain arranged on their shelves, holding a history that has changed hands. The town is quiet above the hidden archive, but quiet does not mean empty. Gravity Falls. Journal 3 was published by Disney Press on 26 July 2016, extending the world of the television series through another record of its mysteries and remembered dangers. Its pages continue the connection between McGucket, the portal, and Stanford Pines, allowing the old inventor's scattered history to remain part of the larger account. Forgotten memories are not treated as permanently annihilated. Instead, they may return through evidence, friendship, written records, and the difficult movement of a mind finding its way back towards itself. McGucket does not receive a single perfect answer beneath the museum. He receives pieces, and the pieces are enough to begin rebuilding a relationship with his past. The machine made forgetting easy, but recovery remains possible, slow and human. Morning light settles gently over Gravity Falls, warming the roof while the last moisture shines in the gutters. A distant bell marks the hour, and the sound travels between houses before thinning into the trees. The museum windows hold broad rectangles of pale gold. Beneath them, the stone corridors retain the smell of wax, paper, and rain-soaked earth. A memory tube rests against another with a soft clink, as though the archive has shifted in its sleep. The town continues its business above the rooms where names have been erased and recovered. No street sign reveals the portal's location. No ordinary passerby sees Stanford Pines in the morning haze or understands why McGucket pauses beside an old diagram. Mysteries may be hidden beneath Gravity Falls, yet they have not truly disappeared. Their consequences remain, their traces endure, and the quiet town carries them into another day.